Good evening. I call to order our evening city council session. The mayor's excused. We will first have our request for citizens petitions. I ask that everyone please adhere to your 3 minutes. Don't want to see if the gavel works on you tonight. But we definitely want to make sure that we do have a chance to hear what you have to say and address your matters as appropriate. If not from here tonight, at least from the staff and following up with you. The first person we have to speak is Ms. Isabel Worthy Maddox, coming before us.
Good evening. Let me find my presentation up here. Where's Carlos when I need him? Oh, I just want my, this is the
What was the name of yours?
Glenwood Place or 30 Grub Ventures.
Let's see.
Maybe that one.
You know, email it.
Yeah, we sent it in. Mary Galecki sent it in.
All right, hold on. Oops. Give me 1 second. That's not it.
Yes, it is.
You know, that one?
Right. It's not that one. I have two things tonight.
It's not that one.
No,
But it's by the same person?
it's the same.
Oh, okay.
There we go, right there. You got it. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh. I'm here on behalf of Grub Ventures and 3800 Glenwood Owner LLC, owner and developer of the property at 3800 Glenwood Avenue, primarily an office building of 118,000 square feet, which is now under construction. We're requesting leave to file an amendment or a text change to amend one zoning condition from a 2005 zoning case. And as you can see from these conditions, there were some pretty complicated conditions. At the time, the code in effect at the time limited retail in O&I zoning to 10% of the building and 3,000 square foot per individual retail user. It was merely a restatement of a code requirement, and as you know, that code requirement is not in effect anymore. Since then, Raleigh has grown and its approach to retail has changed and mixed use. And we have approved a new comprehensive plan designating this property as office and residential mixed use. We've approved a new UDO, which emphasizes mixed use, and we've remapped this property to OX7 conditional use, which unfortunately for us retained the old zoning conditions. So retail under this zoning conditions is limited to 10% of the space in the buildings, which would be 11,800 feet in this case, and further limited it to 3,000 square feet per single retail tenant. And as you know, under the UDO, without these conditions, we'd have a limitation of 15% of the building, or 17,700 square feet, with no cap on the single retail user. We have a mission at Glenwood Place to create mixed use. We have retail in the first phase of the Glenwood Place apartments, which is now leased up, and we have 3,800 Glenwood, which is now under construction. And you may have seen it as you drive down Glenwood Avenue. We feel like we'll have a higher probability of success if we have more flexibility with tenants. The retail will allow residents and office dwellers to eat lunch and or dinner and run some errands without getting back on Glenwood Avenue. Our simple request is that we be allowed in the space already approved by the city to vary the size of retail tenants by eliminating the 3,000 square foot limit per establishment. We are not requesting additional retail entitlement, and the 10% cap will stay in place. So we can build 11,800 feet of retail now, and we would also be able to build 11,800 retail if this text change were approved. There will be no change to density, traffic, or parking based on this text change. This would merely allow us to divide the space so that we could lease, instead of 4 tenants, we could maybe do 2 tenants. Our prospective tenants are, with few exceptions, larger than 3,000 feet. This text change will allow us to attract high-quality tenants and better address the market to create a place that both we and the comprehensive plan envision. So we request that you approve our beginning the process of a text change to address this zoning condition. Thank you.
All right.
This is in my district, and I've met with Ms. Maddox, and I would be happy to see this move forward as a text change.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. Any more questions? All right. Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed have the same right. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. It's been brought to my attention that Mr. Robert Rice has withdrawn, so we now have Ms. Carla Wright.
Good evening. I'm Calla Wright of 613 Cooper Road, Raleigh. I'm here today to address the issue with gentrification of reused wastewater tower. The reused wastewater tower houses toilet flushing water. It's located in a residential neighborhood, should be placed in an industrial area near the yard waste center. The tower is elevated on a hill and continues to be a safety issue. Floods my yard during rainfall, create soil erosions because the trees were cut down and the natural setting destroyed. Your stacks of hay, young trees, and grass does not stop the flooding and the soil erosions. After several phone calls, numerous emails, and presentation to the council seeking resolution, I contacted the council and city manager, who ignored my phone call. And the staff and all have proven that they are incapable of resolving this problem they created, and this exemplifies poor leadership. If the reused wastewater tower with toilet flushing water was located in North Raleigh, North Hills, downtown Raleigh, would it take this long for you to address and resolve this problem? If I were white, from an affluent background and a gentrifier, would you place a reused wastewater tower in my backyard view? Former Mayor Charles Meeker, a Democrat, and the Raleigh City Council constructed the tower with toilet flushing water in our neighborhoods to benefit the Raleigh Country Club's lavish playgrounds, golf course, and recently the wastewater tower was used to water Dick's property, a former slave plantation. It is obvious you are trying to run us off our land in our neighborhood. And in 2002, former Mayor Charles Meeker, a Democrat, demolished the housing projects that included Halifax Court, Walnut Terrace, Chavis Heights, without regard to the large number of families you displaced. Loss of history excluded low-income families, elderly, and you continue to discriminate against the very people who put you in office to bring in the influx of white affluent families. Rich gentrifiers, real estate developers, and investors have made enormous financial gains off the backs of black people, loss of land. And the city council, and this happens to be a Democrat council, and our representatives from District C, West, Weeks, and Branch allowed this to happen. Many of the Southeast Raleigh residents have lost homes because of predatory lending, high interest rates, foreclosures, families living in hotels, forced homelessness, enormous rent fees, and now renting rooms because they cannot afford to pay rent. You failed to make provision for those who wanted to remain in their homes, but focus on the affluent, wealthy citizens in making Raleigh suitable for your gentrifiers. We will no longer sit back and accept this brutal form of discriminatory treatment. We will speak out on Election Day.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, I believe the staff have a presentation on this matter,
Staff can certainly comment and present some information if you would like.
if they could.
Okay. TJ Lynch with Public Utilities is here to talk about the water tower.
Yeah, I can only speak to the water tower. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council, for the opportunity to respond to the concerns that have been raised here tonight and
Talking
at
to
two
the
previous
mic.
City Council meetings.
TJ, use the mic.
Sure. The issues raised have been focused on two key areas as it pertains to the tower: the location and the contents of the tank itself. As reported in backup memos, the location of the tank was selected using sound engineering practices, practices that took into consideration existing assets, the end users of the resource, and the topography as major inputs to that decision. As you will see in the next few slides, and I have a few slides here, elevated tanks for water storage we have all over the service area and in residential areas. You can see here's the Chamberlain tank, very close to residential community. North Hills tank, also close to residences. The Rand Hill tank, the Garner area, close to residences. The Springdale tank, in a residential setting. The Strickland tank, houses all around it. Industrial on one side, but also in the backyards of houses. The Westgate tank, you can clearly see the houses, the residential areas surrounding the tank. And this is the Sunnybrook tank. This is the tank in question. And you can see this is a different picture of that same tank. The property outlined in red is Ms. Wright's property. And I want to show you exactly what's in that tank. It's been pointed out that it's a reuse tank and not a drinking water tank, and this is a sample I pulled out of that tank today. It's highly treated water that's used as an excellent resource. Also, stormwater drainage issues have been raised as a concern, and we have completed a project at this site to improve the security of this area. We had to install a new fence. In doing so, we did have to remove the vegetative cover that was there, and we've reseeded and replanted and are trying to establish that vegetative cover back. During that period, we did use straw bales along the fence for erosion control to make sure that we didn't have sediment leaving our property. And because of the ongoing complaints, we asked our stormwater division to come out and do an evaluation of the site to determine whether we were causing any problems. That report is in your backup memo, but basically what it boils down to is it basically indicated that no sediment is leaving our site that's causing any problems or any erosion. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I have some.
Yes, sir.
You indicated no sediment is leaving the site. Is any stormwater leaving the site?
Of course. There is a downward slope on the back of that property, and so just like any house that is on a hill, stormwater when it rains is going to run off from one property to the next.
Is there any opportunity of catching that water and directing it more towards the street rather than to the properties?
Well,
adjacent
the
to it?
entire back side of the property, the low side of the property, backs up to properties all across the back. And so we would probably be directing stormwater into an area that would cause more problems. Right now, it's not eroding, it's not causing any problems.
Well, I understand that, but I guess the issue is about the stormwater running into her property. And, I mean, I had that kind of a problem as well. And, was able to divert a lot of water from adjacent properties using French drains. I mean, is there opportunity to engineer something to direct the water away from her property?
The only way we could get the water off that property would be to install a pump station that then pumped it up over the hill and back towards Sunnybrook Road.
Okay.
Can you give us cost estimates on that?
We can
Just to
pull that
see,
together.
and see if there's any other options as far as the stormwater?
Sure.
Okay.
And then another question I have is regarding the landscaping itself. Could we get some details about the size and caliper of trees and how closely spaced they are that have been planted to restore the vegetation?
The vegetative cover that's being restored, I'll show you, I have a photo here. See, these are holly trees that have been planted along the fence line, and that was a recommendation of a crime prevention through environmental design project that we partnered with the Raleigh Police Department on because of the issues that we were having with vandalism at this site. And so this is a picture that was taken immediately after we planted the trees and seeded. So we've seeded the area, and right now the grass is growing.
Well, between the camera and the trees, there's a lot of empty land. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of space for potentially more vegetation.
There could be, sure.
So I guess I would ask that we consider maybe adding more trees or more vegetation in that space. One, it would help provide some cover from the tank itself, but it would also help control stormwater and
Right.
movement and erosion.
So, can I
Go ahead.
add to that? Well, just a brief statement. Going back in history, I was on council when this Sunnybrook water tank was proposed, and I opposed it because it backs up to the Worthdale neighborhood. It seemed like there was opportunities if the water was going to serve the golf facility nearby, it would make more sense to put it over there. I didn't prevail. But as far as today is concerned, we have some really talented people who understand low-impact development and on-site stormwater capture. And it seemed like at a very minimum, we should bring that kind of expertise to bear here to help us understand how we can actually, I mean, it's just natural. It's not drainage from off-site, it's just what falls from the sky. And between Dr. Hunt over at NC State and our own Stormwater Management Advisory Committee, there's a lot of expertise there that we could ask what we can do to this essentially bare site to mitigate any rainwater leaving this site. So.
Okay. So I think basically saying just what are the options of addressing it? Sure. And then maybe a stormwater committee item. I'm not sure. I'll let you all bring that back, but that's what thank you for the presentation.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay. Next two speakers I will inform have withdrawn, Ms. Maturing and Ms. Rainey. I just want to make sure because I know you're present. Okay. Next I have is Ms. Diane Powell.
Diana Powell, 530 June Lane, Raleigh, North Carolina. Time, Ecclesiastes 3:1. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. To you, this city council has been 8 months, 31 weeks, 12 days, and 12 hours since this proposal for a citizen advisory board has been presented to you. Tonight, I stand before you as a community advocate, activist, organizer, tax-paying citizen, registered voter, mother, and grandmother. A citizen advisory board is needed because it's time. It's past time. I'm not standing before you screaming, yelling, using profanity, as I have witnessed several times over and over again. I'm sure many of us who are sitting in this room is not blind to these issues that has affected our communities with police killings, shootings, brutality, and excessive use of force, which leads me to address you on accountability. Accountability, responsibility to inform and justify decisions in ethics and governance. Accountability is answerable. Blameworthiness, liability, and the expectation of account giving. As an aspect of governance, it has been central to discussions related to problems in the public sector, nonprofit and private and individual contexts. So therefore, we should all want to be held accountable and complete transparency. If you, the council, will review this proposal carefully and without prejudice or biased thinking, it should be easy deciding to move this proposal forward. To think we have a perfect law enforcement department as well as a perfect community, that's not logical thinking or leadership. In this proposal, it holds everyone accountable. The last proposal that was presented by this staff of this city, this council mentioned and wanted to know what the community has to say. I present to you tonight signed petitions from the community of citizens in support of this proposal. Does this proposal have all the answers? No. And will it solve all of our problems? Of course not. But it will give us a start. On August 15, 2018 at 4:45 p.m., if this council would have had an active citizen advisory board, then maybe 21-year-old Ronnie Hyman who was engaged in a high-speed chase in Southeast Raleigh District, this board would have known when the call went over the radio shots had been fired, that these shots was not by Mr. Hyman, but the officer who was on the scene, as well as having information that Mr. Hyman suffered from a severe case of mental illness. Just in that one and many incidents with an active citizen advisory board, this situation would have might been turned out a little different, not only for the Hyman family, but for the officers as well. It's important to be transparent in all areas of police and community engagement. In my closing, we as a community are asking you to do the right thing and make this motion to this proposal into consideration and vote in support of it. If you choose to continue to ignore our voices, then the next voice you will hear will be at the ballot poll.
Thank you.
because a change will come.
Do you have,
Thank you.
thank you for passing off to the clerk. Next, we have Mr. Irving.
My name is Dean Irving, and I live at 406 Yarmouth Road. I am speaking in favor of establishing a community oversight board with power to investigate, subpoena, and discipline. Last month, after our black son had been stopped, my wife and I spoke here. She will give you this month's story. We are activists for several causes, just as you are. If you were not an activist, you would not care about Raleigh and do the work to get you in this position. One of the groups we support is Stop Torture Now. During a press conference about torture taxis in North Carolina, it occurred to me that to most people, the fact that North Carolina has been and may still be involved in torture is just not a big deal. And how that feeling may relate to the white citizens' attitude towards the Raleigh Police Department. Wars kill people and rain down terror on people. The USA is conducting wars in 7 countries that we know of. We taxpayers are the ones supporting and taking part in these wars. Most of us could not live with ourselves if we knew of every woman, child, and man our wars terrorize. We distance ourselves and rationalize that, yes, it is a bad thing, but what could we do? We as a people, in general, accept that terror is being done in our name. And as long as it is done in some foreign land or to someone other than us, we can ignore it. In our country, not just Raleigh, our black citizens are being terrorized in ways that would never happen to white folks. There's no need for this to happen anywhere, especially in Raleigh. My dear 80-year-old aunt was weaving on Wade Avenue and was stopped by the Raleigh police. The officer came to the window and she said, "I'm so glad to see you, young man. I'm trying to get to my nephew's house. Can you help me?" And after he gave her directions and she started to put the car in gear and go on, the officer did ask her one question. "Aren't you at all curious as to why I stopped you?" This is the relationship we should all have with our peace officers. Thank you.
Ms. Irving?
Was there a question?
No, next speaker, Mrs. Irving.
I am Sandy Irving, 406 Yarmouth Road. I hope you remember that I shared a story last month about driving while black. I am unfortunately back this month with another story about our guardian son getting stopped again by RPD. I'll share with you the following text from him. Quote, "I got stopped again by police last night, and I don't want my kids going to Bible school. That is going to teach them the world is a great place filled with butterflies and flowers. I want them in something that is going to teach them how to move as a black person in this world. P.S. There is nothing you can do. This is how it is for me and my boys. It's life. I got a feeling I'm going to end up dying by the police." Unquote. So I'm back here for a second consecutive month sharing the terror imposed on black citizens and requesting a community oversight board that will provide for independent investigations and important due process for police. If another person is shot by RPD, that tragedy will, in a rephrase of one of MLK's talk, be the responsibility of every politician who has moved down the path of demagoguery, of law enforcement agents who practice lawlessness in the name of the law, and of the citizens who ignore the system and the philosophy which produces these tragedies. I'm concerned not only about deaths, as horrible as that is, I'm concerned about the message we are giving our black citizens that have to be subjected to police stops because of the color of their skin. I want to be part of a city that chooses to provide a police force that builds up our citizens, all of them, but especially the black and brown ones that are often put down by our white privilege and our systemic racism that is dominant in our policing. One way to do this is with a community oversight board that can give us the opportunity to improve and be better so that no one needs to be here next month.
Thank you. Mr. David Buboltz. Is he present? Okay. Peter Firth. Okay. Kathy.
Might be here.
I am Peter Firth, 3640 Armida, Wake Forest. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children." This is a warning to mankind of what happens when the word of God is neglected and ignored. I grieve that we are a people who totally disrespect the author and finisher of life. Holy Scripture is not revered in our land, and God's name is blasphemed, and His word reduced to fit a man-centered worldview that is nothing more than false teaching and heresy. It is one thing for God to deal with us in judgment, but He will also forget our children. What about the children? What type of world are we creating for our children when we leave the children? What type of heritage are we leaving behind? As we believe in and follow after the Lord Jesus Christ, we care for the souls of people, but I must confess that I am more concerned about the children who will face the consequences of our actions in life and our inactions. Our children are witnesses to how society willingly disobeys God by allowing selected children to be murdered at the whim of their parents. At the meeting last month, we were advised by the city attorney that Raleigh couldn't mandate that no abortions be performed in the city, that it is impossible to make Raleigh a sanctuary city free from the stain of abortion. Federals won't allow for it. I would like to remind the council that abortion is only legal because of a misguided Supreme Court decision who deemed it okay for parents to kill their children for any reason they see fit. Roe v. Wade is not law. It is just a radical, unfortunate decision. To create a sanctuary city means bucking the system. There is historical precedence for this. There are cities and sanctuaries for illegal aliens defying federal court laws, and the question is not if we can create a sanctuary city, but are we willing to? Where do our convictions lie? I would posit that we take more care in obeying God than obeying the godless dictates of our own government. It is a hard road to hoe, perhaps, but it is the right way and a narrow way. I don't advocate rebellion. We are commanded by God to live peaceful lives in obedience to those whom God has placed in authority. There comes a time, though, that a man's authority goes against God, and we must obey God rather than man, as Daniel did, and God saved him from the lion's den. And as the apostles did, though commanded not to preach the gospel, they glorified God, openly preaching Jesus. And we would see, if we seek God's help, He will show us the right way to go. Life is sacred. It starts with the child in the womb. We must do all that we can to protect life at any stage. And we are failing in this. We have so much work to do. Our most precious asset that we have is our children. And what are we leaving our children? So many people I talk with, they say, we can't do anything.
Started your time 30 seconds late.
Oh, 30 seconds?
Yeah, he started 30 seconds late.
Oh, so I'm already done.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem.
There you go, ma'am.
Kathy?
My name is Kathy Firth, and I live at 3640 Armida Drive, Wake Forest. I am a follower of Jesus Christ, and thank you for letting me speak to you tonight. I am here to plead for the youngest lives of our citizens, children in the womb. I plead that as a governing body of officials, you would do what is right in making Raleigh a sanctuary city for the unborn. God's word says, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. We are instructed to submit to governing authorities if they do not violate the commands of God, our ultimate authority. For instance, in God's word, the midwives were told to kill the male children born to the Hebrew women and to let the girls live, but they did not obey. They feared God. They let the male children live. In Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, everyone knows that story, right? Did not follow the evil king's decree to worship the golden image. In God's word, Daniel would not cease praying to God and would not bend the knee to the evil king. So I must ask, who is your authority? To whom do you bend the knee? Is it to God, a political party, or to your own judgments? Members of the council, there is only one ultimate authority, and that is Jesus Christ. Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. God's word says the Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life. The wrath of God remains on him. God's authority does not change with either your acceptance or your rejection of it, but your future destiny does. We have all fallen short of the glory of God, but he sent Jesus to bear our sins on the cross, to rise again on the third day, and to save us from the judgment that we deserve. All are called to repent, to believe in his Son, Jesus Christ, and be saved. Please use the authority that you have been given by God to govern rightly. The greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Can we please show our love for God by keeping his commandments and loving our smallest neighbor, our unborn children? Will you please show mercy and act justly by providing a place of safety to the most vulnerable among us? Can we again make a mother's womb the safest place for children instead of the vilest place of murder? Will you consider ending abortion in our community? Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council.
Thank you. Kevin Creasy? Creasy.
My name is Kevin Creasy. I reside at 2129 Balboa Road, Raleigh, North Carolina. 1 Timothy 2:2 directs us to pray for kings and all those who are in authority. You have all been prayed for. Your authority as government leaders has been granted by God. Jesus illustrates this in John 19:9-19. Where do you come from, he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have either power to free you or to crucify you? Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Colossians 1:16, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers, rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Luke 12:48 states, everyone who has been given much, much more will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So I urge you to consider making Raleigh a sanctuary city for unborn babies who are gifts from God. Psalm 127:3. Children are a heritage from the Lord, an offspring, a reward from Him. God could form the next unborn baby that could discover the cure for cancer or the great next president of the United States. We are created in God's image, Genesis 1:26. Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, Psalm 139:14. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Unfortunately, much of abortion is a product of another grave sin, fornication. God intended sexual relations to be between the confines of holy matrimony. Genesis 2:4, that is why a man leaves his father and his mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Since people so commonly break this law of God, there is the consequence of unplanned pregnancy. Galatians 6:7, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Therefore, much of abortion is a form of birth control. Innocent babies are the victims of this injustice. Proverbs 6:7 states that God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. Don't be on the wrong side of history. Since Roe v. Wade, there have been nearly 61 million babies murdered. Romans 1:29-31 condemns murderers and fornicators. God is loving and merciful, yet wrathful and just. One's sins must be paid for. Jesus came to earth 2,000 years ago, died of a virgin, born of a virgin, lived a perfect sinless life, died on a cross, rose again on the third day, defeating sin. And yet John 3:16-17, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Romans 10:13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. I urge you to repent, believe the gospel, and make Raleigh a sanctuary city for unborn babies. John 6:37, Jesus said, all that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. John 10:9, Jesus said, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved and go in and out and find pasture. In John 11:25, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live.
Thank you. William Roach. Is William Roach present? Okay. At this time, we will now move to other matters for public hearing. The first one we have is petition annexation. Is anyone here for 7741 Midtown Market Avenue? Is anyone here for petition of annexation? Is anyone here for petition of annexation? All right. I will close that hearing and bring it back to the table. This is in, Mr. Cox, this is in your district?
I have no idea.
All right. The staff.
Should we hold it?
Yeah, let's hold, I move we hold this for the next meeting.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter. If they're not here, I just soon hold it.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yes.
No problem.
That's okay with Mr. Cox, it's in your district.
No one has approached me about it, so I don't know what to recommend.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll hold this until August 20th. Next, we have rezoning case Z319, Harrington and Peace, in the block bounded of Capitol Boulevard, Peace, Harrington, and Johnson Streets. Staff has a presentation.
Yes, city planning staff is here.
All right, so this is Z319. Oh, here she comes.
Late arrival.
Thanks for your patience. I'm sorry about that. This is a rezoning case at Harrington and Peace Street. It's a request to rezone just under 3 acres from DX12 shopfront and DX12 with no frontage to DX40 with shopfront and conditions. and DX40 with no frontage and conditions. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map overall. The Planning Commission voted in favor with one no vote who would have preferred to see affordable housing conditions. And the North Central CAC also voted in favor, split vote. So this is located on the south side of Peace Street between Harrington and Capitol Boulevard. You can see Peace Street here, Capitol Boulevard here. Future Deborah Meadows, Halifax Mall, just some of the landmarks nearby. A couple of views of the site from the street. So this is Peace Street looking south and Peace Street looking east. So you can see the new Capitol Boulevard Bridge, and then from under the bridge looking back to the west at the site. There have been a number of iterations of conditions here. I understand that the applicant may be interested in amending again at the close of the public hearing. This version was provided to you on paper at your places. I discovered in preparing this presentation that this version was not included in the agenda materials. I apologize for that. So what you want is the version on the table. It prohibits a handful of uses, specifies screening and articulation for parking structures, prohibits EFS for siding as siding material, specifies brick, stone, concrete, other permitted materials, specifies full cutoff light fixtures, specifies a minimum of 10,000 square feet of active use on the ground floor. More about the parking structure screening and its comparability to the existing Citrix parking deck. Condition about what would trip the requirement for a traffic impact analysis, and an offer of $1 million to be placed in a fund for the city's affordable housing program. The projection about what kind of impact this rezoning could have was revised as part of the Growth and Natural Resources discussion of this case, and those updated figures are also on paper at your place, as well as in this slide. So the total residential units could go up, the density as well as the number, an increase in your office square footage, and also in the maximum total building square footage. Future land use map designates this as the central business district. You can see the site highlighted in yellow here. And the urban form map also designates, this shows up in the downtown district on the urban form map. It's also adjacent to Capitol Boulevard, which is designated as a transit emphasis corridor in the currently adopted urban form map. The proposed urban form map as part of the comp plan update revises the information around transit and transit stops. The conversation right now indicates that BRT could come down either Capitol or West. That's not yet resolved. Regardless, the site would be proximate to BRT service. Overall, consistent with the plan, a number of policies, including the future land use map and the urban form map, with the offer of the shop front frontage. Again, the Planning Commission and the CAC both recommend approval, and I would be happy to answer questions. I believe the applicant also has a visual presentation in addition to oral remarks.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions before we open the hearing? Okay. It's 8 minutes per side. We will now open the hearing. First, those in favor of this project.
Hi, thank you all for hearing us tonight. I know you've got a very busy agenda, so I'll try and move quickly. There are also some folks who would like to speak in favor. For the record, I'm Bonner Gaylord, representing Kane Realty and Williams Building and Realty for this project. And just first want to thank you all for the time that y'all put into this. Again, I know the effort and energy, and it's not a hard. It's not an easy place to be, and I know that y'all are doing your best to make these hard decisions. And the way that the council makes these hard decisions is figuring out what is reasonable and in the public interest. And looking at from basically there's two methods of uncovering if it's reasonable in the public interest, and that's the planning process that goes into trying to decide how we're going to grow our city, and then the citizen engagement process. With respect to the planning, this project is consistent with the comp plan policies, it's consistent with the growth framework map, with the future land use map, and with the urban form map. And as y'all know, we've doubled every 20 years for the past 100 years, and in 20 years from now, when this city is doubled, we've got to find a way to grow in the right way. And that is what the planning process has gone into. And from a citizen engagement process, we had 2 CAC meetings, a positive CAC vote, multiple neighborhood meetings with the Glenwood South Neighborhood Coalition to keep them up to speed, 2 Planning Commission meetings with a 6-to-1 vote there. We've been to the council and GNR twice, and we've worked out what we think are a good range of conditions. We have, let's see, how do I? Advance. There we go. So we've prohibited a lot of intrusive uses, screened the entire site with both shopfront frontage and the same language that shopfront frontage requires along Capitol. We've addressed aesthetic concerns, and we have added a condition that requires a TIA at site plan, which is consistent with the way it's done across the rest of the city, excluding downtown, but we're willing to put that condition in. And essentially, if there's a traffic failure caused by our project, then we either have to remedy it or dial back the project. So this is alleviating any concerns that the intersections will be unworkable and that it'll break any component of the transportation network. We also have offered a $1 million contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund, and at the request of council, we provided an analysis that shows that $1 million will actually go 10 to 25 times further if it's deployed through the city's funds than through an inclusionary component. If we did 5% of units at 400 units, that'd be 20 units for 5 years, or it could be 40 units with $1 million, because the city puts in about $25,000 per unit, and that could be for 30 to 50 years. So much greater impact to make a contribution in lieu with this particular project because of the nature of the project. So we've also added a bike share station to add additional accessibility and transportation options for the area, and we feel like this is the right spot for this project. The opportunity to provide an incredible gateway into our northern part of downtown is something that I think we can't fail to acknowledge. And with Devereaux Meadows Park going in, with all the transportation investments and improvements, we think that this is the right project for the area, and we hope you'll agree.
Okay. Is there anyone else that want to speak in favor of this project?
Good evening, council members. My name is Larry Miller, and I'm president of the Glenwood South Neighborhood Collaborative, GSNC. For those of you who may not know, GSNC is an organization of residents and businesses located in the Glenwood South neighborhood. We currently have 675 members. We're actively involved in community projects to promote the Glenwood South neighborhood as a wonderful place to live, work, and play. We have organized and implemented many community-based projects, including the annual Glenwood Fair, featuring local restaurants, art projects such as painting the crosswalks with artistic designs, activities promoting walkability, hanging snowflakes and origami cranes during the holiday season. GSNC thought it would be helpful for you to have some actual data to use in making your decision on this proposed zoning amendment. So we created a survey to briefly gather responses from our members. We received 258 responses. Of the total, 167 live in Glenwood South, 49 work in Glenwood South, 42 live in downtown but not Glenwood South, and another 26 do not live in downtown or work downtown. Out of those surveyed, 202 of the, or 78.29% of the respondents recommended that the City Council approve the rezoning request. 26 or 21.71% recommended that the City Council disapprove the zoning request. Of the GSNC members who responded to the survey, there was a 4-to-1 majority who recommended that the City Council approve the rezoning request. Reasons for supporting it include 89% of the members thought that walkable urban development growth downtown was preferable to suburban sprawl. 37% supported the proposal due to its location, with access to existing infrastructure, including highways, public utilities, and future public transit. 47% thought it would provide an economic benefit to the neighborhood due to an increase of office workers and residents, and 16% favored approval because of the proposed donation of $1 million in funding for affordable housing. So there were 56 people who opposed it, and of those, 73% thought it would increase traffic congestion. 71% thought the height would be incompatible with the neighborhood. 25% specifically said that 20 stories is the maximum height that any building should be allowed in downtown Raleigh. 18% thought the proposal should not be approved because the building plan did not include affordable housing. The results of this survey express the overwhelming support for the zoning proposal from the residents and businesses in Glenwood South. I do not suggest that I am an expert on zoning matters or urban planning. You have your own experts for these matters who have expressed their support for this proposal. However, I do represent voters in the Glenwood South neighborhood who have expressed an overwhelming 4-to-1 support for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. There's only 27 seconds. Is there anyone else that briefly want to speak in favor of this? Okay. 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 All right, thank you. Now, those who are opposed of this rezoning.
And may I reserve those 27 seconds just to...
Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this rezoning? Please come forward. And again, it's a shared 8 minutes.
Hi, I'm going to try and make this short and sweet, but I'm Sally Hale. I live at 407 Oakwood Avenue, and I do use the Peace Corridor quite a bit as my main thoroughfare, but I'm more concerned that the original current zoning tripled to the proposed new zoning, and then with everything going to be proposed over at Seaboard being developed, it's going to be a lot on that street, on that corridor, and I'm okay with 10 stories. Just as long as it's manageable, because my fear is it's going to turn into North Hills that's really overdeveloped and bottlenecked on Six Forks. Even getting off 40 onto Six Forks, it's a mile long any given time just to exit onto Six Forks. Crabtree, same thing with Glenwood Avenue corridor with all the development. So I don't think Peace Street is the place for all this overdevelopment, and just that it's not also, I don't consider it smart growth in the sense it's not sensible. And the whole idea, if even affordable housing was in the mix, as far as being there present on any development, it would just be more, providing more promise, more attractiveness for affordable housing to be included and at the table rather than being put elsewhere with all the workplace. It's going to be in all those developments, an opportunity for people to live and work in and provide a quality of life. But I'm more concerned of just the density that's not going to support that space. 10 stories is fine. 40, 50 stories, or whatever the gateway proposal just seems to be extreme. Thank you.
Good evening. I was unable to add copies to the presentation. May I give you paper copies? I've got 8 copies here. First, my name is Matthew Carmel. I'm a resident owner at the West for about 6.5 years. 12th floor, facing north, so I have a great overview of the entire project. First point, I've seen what Kane has done at the Dillon. I like it, and I can't wait for the project to roll out. But I have few concerns. First, start with aesthetics. The first photo that you see there is the view of the phase 1, 12-story high. The second one is my rendering. Unfortunately, two things surprises me so far, that we've gotten to this point without seeing a rendering and without a TIA. I'll get to that in a few seconds. So that's my rendering of what a 40-story building would look like on this site. Now, beauty is subjective, but I can see anyone jumping up and down with joy seeing that. My second concern is traffic. In the past 3-4 years, we've added the Gramercy, the Link, and the Metropolitan, just within 1 block away from Smoky Hollow. There are few developments now on and around Hillsborough, the Dillon, and now we are talking about 1,000 added units to residential units to the to Smoky Hollow. I don't have the numbers, but my estimate is that we are talking about a factor of 10 increase in residential units, residential capacity since I moved in, and we have not added an inch to the infrastructure. The third photo that you have there is traffic on West between Peace and my building, and I don't know how far south the jam went. And that's traffic as it is today, before we've added any resident, office, retail to Smoky Hollow, before Publix opened, before we reconnected Capitol and West with Johnson, hasn't opened yet. Where will all this traffic go? My third concern is mix. All these developments that I mentioned, they are all rental units. Not a single condo was added. Do you really want downtown to become exclusively resided by transient demographics? Even when they finally want to stay here, build a family, there's nowhere to go and they leave the area. So, with these 3 concerns, I would suggest limit the building to 20 stories. Do something about the mix. I assume that's something that should be coming from you. And please do something meaningful about traffic. Thank you very much.
Try to read this off the computer, so give me a second. Thanks. Try to be brief. I'm Bob Geary at 202 East Park Drive. I'm on the Planning Commission, and I'm the no vote against this rezoning project. I think that it fails to address a number of city policies that are important, but that's actually not why I'm here. I'm not asking you to be guided by me. In fact, there are better guides than me. The other night, I went to the forum on gentrification at Fletcher. The next day, I read a critique that I know many of you also saw. The Vision of the Poor was the title by Courtney Napier. Her podcast is called Mothering on the Margins. Here's what she says. As tired as we all are of having conversations, they still need to happen. But Raleigh's leadership must go to the ones most affected by our housing crisis. Not the lucky individuals who have made it out of the neighborhoods, but the folks still there and hanging on by their fingernails. So, Ms. Napier, I'm not one of those folks. I don't need affordable housing. I don't need transit, although I'd like to have it. The best I can offer on Planning Commission is to try to channel what people would tell us if they came those in need of housing and transportation, but they don't come to our meetings. What would they say if they didn't own a car? What would they say to a massive project on a planned transit corridor with a grocery store that residents can walk to, but only an exclusive clientele can live there? We have policies, equity policies, that say that our transit system should serve everyone, whether high, low, or middle income. Ms. Napier has some words about policies, but what she really wants to talk about is the vision of the poor. What do they want? Her advice: go to the churches, go to the community centers, go where people in actual need of affordable housing are. Ask what they would do with this high-rise project. Whatever they say, I think it will have wisdom. Thank you.
All right, there's 9 seconds left. Anyone else? And nine seconds.
I just have to comment. My name's Susan Singer. I'm a resident of Oakwood.
Start it.
Is that okay? I'm sorry. You can come too. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, the idea of adding a bike share there is almost offensive.
All right.
Because I ride bikes and people aim for me.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
We'll now close the hearing and bring it back to council for questions that some may have.
Question for Bonner.
Mike,
Oh, I'm sorry.
use your mic.
Question for Bonner. I have had, first of all, what has been distributed is conditions dated June 7th.
We submitted the other conditions. They're draft conditions. We have the draft conditions prepared,
Okay,
but they're not
so these
part
are
of.
really not useful.
Right. In order to submit the new conditions, we need the public hearing closed to submit
Right.
those.
But you could have given us unsigned conditions to look at. But that's unfortunate, because obviously, hopefully we moved way past these conditions, but we don't have it here, so we can't talk about it. One of the things we have talked about is this traffic impact analysis, and we discussed the scope of it. And we've also discussed our aspirational views about transit, BRT in the future. It could be 5-10 years away on West Street. But what we've also discussed is that in order for you and others to finance these high-rise projects, your financiers require you to provide substantial parking within your project. And I think when you showed us a rendering of your project, which I'm sure this gentleman would love to see, you said there were about 8 floors of parking in it.
That would be the maximum.
Okay, so so it's in the blue area. It would be in the blue area on the diagram here. The other projects are already in site plan review?
The other 2 projects are already under construction.
So you know what the parking you're requiring or providing in those buildings is, right?
Yes, it's like 750 and about 650 to 750 in each.
In each?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, obviously, those are, what, 12-story buildings? The one you're proposing is?
One's 12, one's 9,
Okay.
and 9 and 6.
Okay. So anyway, it's safe to assume that we'll see additionally parking at least that much, if not more, in C3.
Probably something around that. I mean, obviously, we got to spend a year to design the project, and that would be when we would have a firm number.
Yeah.
And that would also be when transportation staff would agree to the ingress and egress,
Right.
and the roads would be substantially complete to be able to get an accurate analysis of what mitigation impacts or what dialing back of the project we would be required to do.
So, and just, you probably already know it, most folks don't know it, that this TIA will include other projects that staff knows about that are in this vicinity as well. So, for instance, right across Capitol Boulevard from your blue site, there's another 40-story plan that's been submitted for rezoning. And so be contributing its own 800 parking spaces to that. So it's great when we talk about our transit future, but the reality that you're having to deal with in building this project is you're providing thousands of parking spaces, and there'll be hundreds or thousands of others in this vicinity, and we all know that the ability to improve the traffic capacity on Peace Street is it's about as limited as any street in the city of Raleigh. So I just wanted everybody to know that's a big concern for me. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we're all looking forward to BRT and high-frequency transit and walkability, and obviously a project like this is going to have a lot of internal trip capture and walkability between uses on site, but we know that our transportation staff can figure those items into the analysis. I do want to speak to just make a few more comments. Thank you very much, Bonner.
Certainly.
And that is, and I'll submit some written comments, but in a nutshell, what I want to say is that in this future bus rapid transit location, we need to be true to our equity policies. Regarding equitable housing for all, we need to ensure that the benefits of growth are shared more fairly with all of our residents so that housing is available in downtown Raleigh at all income levels and not just for the rich. Our goal is that transit will provide density and affordability. We've been planning for this day when we'll be able to build more compact, walkable, mixed-use developments, and it all hinges on transit. But if it's transit for the rich, that doesn't really accomplish what we need to do. I think we can achieve both, but the public is counting on us to achieve both and not give in to the market forces of gentrification. Regarding adequate mobility infrastructure, we speak about our transit-oriented future, but the reality is that the financials of these projects require lots and lots of parking. And so our reality in response is we have to make sure that the street grid in the near term continues to work. So in closing, I'll say we have a responsibility to clearly understand and effectively mitigate the impacts of the real vehicular trips associated with the many projects that are actively in rezoning and site plan review in this vicinity. So I look forward to continuing the conversation, Bonner.
Right. I have a question around the TIA and traffic analysis. When are you planning on doing that?
That comes at site plan review. At site plan review, we submit to the city after negotiating with transportation staff on some of the components I mentioned earlier in terms of capacity, ingress, egress, the actual mix of units, which will determine the true traffic counts coming out of there. And with the roadway network complete, that'll give a true analysis. Obviously, it's Johnson Street isn't done. The lights are under construction. They're not on detection. They're on timers. So it's admittedly a problem right now, but a lot of the construction will resolve a substantial amount of that. And then when we have the project design, the transportation staff can do an analysis to give a true impact of the detriment that may be caused to the intersections and make sure that it doesn't pass any thresholds of functionality.
Okay. And if for some reason the traffic count is to a point where it impacts the height, adjustments will be made?
That's right. We would either have to make improvements to infrastructure, or if those infrastructure improvements were impossible, then yeah, we would have to address that through a redesign.
Okay. Any other?
Yes. Well, first of all, regarding the traffic, my understanding of what we agreed to in committee was that we would look at the level of service at the intersections, and we would try to maintain a level service E or greater, and we would take into account the cumulative effect of all the development in Smoky Hollow in making that assessment, not a cap of 500 and some trips in and out of one site.
And that you're exactly right, and that's in the updated conditions, and I apologize. I thought that our team had delivered that to staff, and that is what we are intending, and that's what we've heard from council, and that's the condition that we've written. But we also want to work on that over the next 30 days with you all, because once we close the public hearing, we've got that 30 days to be able to change those conditions and work with you all to get to the right answer from y'all's perspective.
Okay, so the other concern that I have is regarding our comp plan itself. There is a description in the comp plan of the Central Business District which envisions a downtown that has 40 stories in the downtown core, but heights taper down as you move away from the downtown core. Now, the comp plan does not really address where exactly the downtown core is, although I think everyone agrees that it's certainly Fayetteville Street. How far it extends from Fayetteville Street has not been decided. If you look at the zoning map and you look at the DX district, this site is actually on the edge of the DX district. And so my concern is that if we vote in favor of 40 stories here, it seems to me that we need to modify the comp plan then, because basically what we're doing is we're saying 40 stories is appropriate anywhere in the DX district.
So I have a question for the city attorney. So you mentioned that in 30 days, if we close the hearing tonight, you have to have them submitted within 30 days?
Correct.
You know, we're not going to meet again until later than that. So you could submit them to the city without us having to have a meeting at that time?
It has to be within 30 days, but at least 10 days before the the next council meeting. So you don't have a council meeting until August 20th. So yes, you just consider them at the next council meeting. It doesn't mean you can't communicate with the applicant outside of a meeting if you so desire, as long as there's not a quorum.
Right.
So they have really until August 9th to get them in.
Well,
I'm just saying 10 days before our next meeting is
as soon as
August
we're
20th.
closing the hearing, I would prefer not to close the hearing. I mean, obviously, we have conditions in front of us that are a month old and have changed. We haven't seen the new ones. Many of us are going on vacation and will be out of town during this 30-day period that you're talking about negotiating. And I think, I don't see what the big rush is, that we've got to get the hearing closed so we can get the conditions in so that we can get a decision essentially while most of us are out of town. And so I would prefer to leave the hearing open and have a little bit more time to have some conversations when everybody's in town.
And I would support that.
If that's y'all's preference, we certainly can do that as well.
Connor, could you supply
our preference would be to go ahead and close it, but if you'd like some more time, we're happy to work with that.
Could you supply the council members with your updated version, paper version of your changes?
I thought we had, but apparently y'all don't have the latest version.
We don't have
so
them.
we can get those printed up for you, shortly.
Okay.
We've got them.
That would be helpful.
Yes,
So we will
absolutely.
keep this hearing open until we come back on August 20th. And then that time we will close it. I guess we'll see this August 20th, and then again, we'll determine the next date from there.
Yeah, and we'll get you all those conditions immediately, and we can have conversations up until then, and then at the August 20th meeting as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you all.
We now move to Z419.
You considered this a public hearing at your last meeting on June?
Let's wait 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready?
Well, I thought hold on. Give those leaving a chance to leave so that everyone can hear you. You can go ahead.
Great. So you heard this at your last meeting. You opened the hearing on June 18th. You continued this item until today. So there's a request to rezone just over 17 acres from CX3 and R6 to IX3 with conditions. The Southeast CAC had a split vote here. The Planning Commission recommended approval. If approved, this request would also amend the future land use map from to business and commercial services. And you, at your last hearing, at your last meeting, you did have questions about the history of the future land use map in this area. And there's information in your agenda backup materials tonight, but I also just wanted to call out there was an amendment to the future land use map here since the adoption in 2009 that converted this area. So the zoning request is here, and the 2009 map had designated an even larger area of moderate density residential, and the amendment to the land use map in 2011 recognized that since this area was already used as mostly light industrial flex office space, that future land use was not practical. And so there has been revisit to this area since the adoption of the plan. So I just wanted to bring that forward for your information. I know you had questions about that last time. The offered conditions have not changed. As the public hearing is still open, the applicant cannot revise those. And consistent with the plan overall, but inconsistent with the future land use map and the urban form map. And again, would result in a revision to the future land use map if the zoning were acted on to change the future land use map from community mixed use and moderate density residential to business and commercial services. Can I answer any questions?
So go back to your map where you said modifications were made.
Right, so that was to an area. So this is the zoning area,
Mhm.
and then this area was modified at the original adoption of the 2009 map. The moderate density residential went all the way over here, and that was modified in 2011, recognizing that since this was already in use as flex and light industrial, it was unlikely to convert to moderate density residential.
Okay. All right, so it was kind of moved back to light industrial? Okay.
Yep.
So that's what's adjacent to that property now. Got it.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions from councilors? We
Would require a change in the map, right?
The future land use map, yes, ma'am. And we have provided consistency statements for either eventuality.
All right. And we closed this hearing.
No, sir,
But
it's
we left
still
it
open unless you close
Okay.
it.
All right. The hearing's open. Anyone here just want to speak in favor of this? Any comments?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. My name is Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners, 2235 Gateway Access Point, Suite 201, Raleigh, 27607. I'm here on behalf of Doug Watson, the applicant and property owner. Our preliminary request this evening is to defer this matter to the August 20th meeting while also leaving the public hearing open so that we could have some more time to speak with city councilors to work on some of the issues that were addressed at our first hearing, namely the transitions between the school and the mobile home park, as well as some of the future land use map issues that we discussed earlier. Mr. Watson is here. He had a couple of things that he would like to say and can answer any questions as well. But again, our request, at least at this point, is to defer to the August 20th meeting and to hold the matter open. And unless y'all have any questions, I'll just go ahead and bring Doug up now.
Okay.
Good evening, council. My name is Doug Watson. I live at 1720 R.C. Watson Road, Wendell. And I am the owner of this 17 acres that we're proposing to amend, as well as the adjacent approximately 10 acres where the mobile home park is that keeps coming up, which is already zoned industrial. What I would like to remind, just to clarify a few things, is of the 17 acres we're proposing to rezone, approximately 4 acres of that is already zoned as CX, okay? Which allows a lot of establishments and different things that we're actually agreeing to do away with or limit. And even if they're not limited, they're certainly, we're agreeing to move them a minimum of 500 feet from the school property. As well as, just as a reminder, that the Bullock Farm Road extension that we are going to be required to put in, and we need to put in for traffic reasons, will create a natural buffer within itself, because we are limiting, one of our conditions are limiting any buildings of any kind north of that. So within itself, even though we haven't identified that strip north of the road as tree conservation, we plan on doing that. But even without it being tree conservation, it would naturally be trees and a buffer as well. So just keep in mind that the CX zoning that we currently have on that 4 acres, and I don't know how to use this thing, but anyway, on that 4 acres is already CX. So a lot of things could be allowed in that with no zoning change. I apologize, I just want to look at my note here. So naturally, we're going to have about a 400 to 500 foot buffer between the school property and our buildings, okay, with the Bullet Farm Road, with that strip going through there, which is part of the CX. We think that what we're proposing, just like she mentioned earlier, if you look at the history, I'm not asking you to, I don't have this in writing, but if you look at the history, the Parton family, which I bought the 17 acres from, that originally farm land was approximately 600 acres. And as you see, what is left of that, which was originally farm and then became residential and slowly has evolved, now we're left with really, even though it says 17 acres, we're left with really about 13 acres that we're really talking about the zoning. If you kind of backed out that CX part, so I'm not trying to say we're not rezoning that, but so really as far as a change, so it's almost like there was, I hate to use the word mistake, but because of all of this industrial around with the land use stuff, that this is kind of just something that kind of got overlooked, and it's just left a little plug there. So since we have bought this property, the Parton family, there was 3 of them originally before we purchased. One of them has since passed, so there's 2 family members left. There was 3 houses there. They are in the process, so actually I've already vacated 2 of them and have moved out, actually where I live, towards the Zebulon area. And then there was one tenant that was renting there who has since then put a new mobile home in the trailer park that we have because if you remember, we had some meetings a while back about getting that extended. So we had put, to date, we've only put 1 home in there, which was last week. Another one's going in next week. And then 2 more weeks, we have a 3rd home that's going in. And we're waiting on the county on the last for septic tank permit because of that, because we don't have sewer in that trailer park. So I just wanted to just kind of just reiterate the natural buffer that we'll have with the Bullet Farm Road extension, and that we want to be a good neighbor. And we haven't been asked, and don't really want to restrict all the things, but we are looking at things. We're looking at a colored, precast, or tilt-up concrete type buildings. Not type buildings, that's exactly what we're looking at, with a lot of detail similar to what they have at Eastgate, and as well as what Liberty Property Group, Keystone Development, those kind of people are putting up, around the area. A lot of this is down at Walnut Creek, same kind of stuff. Similar tenants, preferably bigger tenants. And we will not have any of those kind of uses outside of things like, the Amazon Now kind of stuff, the Ferguson Enterprises, those kind of tenants. None of those are our candidates. I'm just using those as example of those kind of things. So we think that this area, if you've ridden through there, I'm sure most of you have, is in desperate need of some facelift, and that's what we think that these buildings will do, that will fit in with the property to our west, which we mentioned in the last meeting, which Wake County Board of Elections just moved in, that has a 15-year lease. And then we also have under contract, and we're closing next Wednesday, the 10 acres immediately to our west, which was part of this Parton as well, but it's already zoned. So all of the land around it is zoned except for this 17 acres is part of our petition, but really 13 outside of this CX. So just wanted to just remind everybody of what we're trying to do to make sure there is separation and no concern with the school issue. Okay. If you have any questions for me on any future, of what our plans are, whether it be on that property or the adjacent or the trailer park, feel free to answer those now.
Okay. Is there anyone else here to speak? If not, is anyone here to speak against this matter? We will close the hearing. Any questions? I'm sorry. Any questions from counselors?
But just a comment, I appreciate the applicant's offer to work on conditions to buffer that. I think I heard you say both the school and the housing to the south?
Correct. They're already in our conditions.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And I'm assuming this, you mentioned a 500-foot buffer. Is that going to be?
Well, between natural with the trees and the road, we're talking about 500 feet separation from the school property line to our closest potential building.
So you're not planning any kind of active use in that 500-foot strip?
We're limited to no buildings at all can be north of Bullet Farm Road.
But it could be parking lots?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, you'll get to those when you come back with the...
Correct, but nothing.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll keep this hearing open and hold this and bring it back on August the 20th.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right. Next we have is Z819.
This is a request to rezone about 0.61 acres from DX5 with an urban limited frontage to DX12 with an urban limited frontage and conditions. This is located on the south side of Cabarrus between Harrington and West. It's consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan and the future land use map. The Planning Commission recommends approval, the same objector with the same preference in this case as in Z3. And this is not in the Northwest CAC.
Central.
This is in the Central CAC. And let me look at this other piece of paper. I believe that the vote indicated here is correct in favor. So you can see the area around, so the site is here and is to the north, east, and south, surrounded by downtown mixed-use districts. On the west side of West Street, you can see there is industrial mixed-use zoning. And then as you get into South Saunders Street, Rosengarten Alley, you see some residential mixed use and some neighborhood mixed use down at the South Street and South Saunders Street intersection. So again, on the south side of Cabarrus between West and Harrington, there's a recent fair weather project here, power station here, Red Hand Amphitheater is here, good number of landmarks there along West Lenoir. Boylan Heights is to the west. The former train station site is just north of here, and then Union Station is farther north on the north side of the tracks. And there, just a reminder about sort of the range of requests in right now in this area for rezoning. So a couple of views of the site from the street. So this is on West Cabarrus at Harrington. And then a view from West Cabarrus at West, looking back towards downtown. And then a view on West Street. You can see the Dillon in the background there. And then one final view from Harrington. So some conditions here. They've prohibited a handful of uses, and then they have limited activity on any rooftop non-residential area. They have imposed a limit on themselves, so no food or beverage service provided or amplified music between midnight and 6 a.m. An increase in residential entitlement here, an increase in potential office, retail, and industrial in their conditions here. They have limited themselves in that industrial category to light manufacturing and research and development. Future land use map here is Central Business District, and the urban form map here also locates them in downtown. Historically, based on the old light rail plan, they were on a transit stop buffer, but they still are relatively proximate to Raleigh Union Station and the future Raleigh Union Station bus station. Consistent with the comprehensive plan overall, including the future land use map and the urban form map, and the Planning Commission and the CAC both recommend approval. What questions could I answer for you?
Questions? All right, we'll open the hearing at this time. Anyone here in favor of this project wish to speak?
Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and councilors. I just wanted to say a few words about our applicant here this evening. It's a group known as Four Line. One moment, I have a slide. I don't have a slide.
Wrong case.
What happened there?
Keep going back.
In any event, their applicant is known as Four Line. It's a group that lives in Raleigh and works in the Triangle area. They are currently working on that fair weather project that Ms. Walter mentioned on the same block, on the south end of that block that is under construction. It's a residential project. And the group became interested in this site when the three sellers came together and put that on the market. Those sellers do include CASA as well as Urban Ministries. As part of their programming, our understanding is that there is a need to get this additional height in order to get the approval and to close on this contract. We do have Dr. Morris here with us tonight from Urban Ministries in case you have any questions for him. And with that, I'm here for questions for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition? In favor? Okay.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Denny, 626 Dorothea Drive. My wife and I are about 5 blocks from this location, and I just want to say we support what's happening in that area. We love the walkability. We love the ability to just sort of experience the neighborhood, right? I mean, I think this would be a welcome addition. When we talk about proximity, I was thinking it's 5 blocks from my house, but it's 3 blocks from the convention center. It's 5 blocks from Union Station. I truly hope you'll support this. And with that, I'll finish. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else here wish to speak in favor? Okay, so anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition? All right, we will now close the hearing and bring it back to the table.
I move that we adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 2nd, 2019, containing the agenda material, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second for approval. Any questions?
Just a comment. I do appreciate the services that the owners of some of these properties provide to our community. Urban Ministries and CASA, they do great work for our less fortunate citizens. I'm myself fortunate that my wife does suppers for 30-some homeless women at Helen Wright every couple of months, and I get a chance to go down there and help her out. And it's amazing work they do. So this is a great opportunity for them to be able to capture some of the value of this land and put it into expanding their facility. It may expand too big for my wife to cook for that many people, but I do appreciate the opportunity that this project provides for them to improve their services to the community.
Okay, any other comments? Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed have the same right. Motion passes. All right. Thank you. Now we have Z3518.
This is located at 3310 Pollock Place. This is just north of Hillsborough and east of Faircloth. This is a request to rezone almost 3 acres from R6 with a special residential parking overlay district to R10 with conditions and that same overlay. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. The Planning Commission and the Hillsborough Wade CAC both recommend approval, as does the Raleigh Historics Development Commission. I will note that during Ask a Planner this evening, I was visited by Brenda Compton, who lives at 400 Stacy Street. She could not attend the public hearing this evening, but she was anxious that you might leave the hearing open until August 20th so that she would have time to learn more about the case and possibly speak to you at that time. She's particularly concerned about the surface condition of Ruffin Street and stormwater issues in the neighborhood at large. So aerial view of the site, we're about halfway between Olds Elementary and Meredith College, again, north of Hillsborough Street, not too far from the Isabel Cannon Park and the Raleigh Rose Garden, in the heart of University Park. This is a closer in view of the site. You can see there are some apartment buildings on the northern portion of the site here, and a single-family house kind of in the middle of the site, and then a very large high power line and easement that run across the edge of the site there along Pollock Place. So here's a view from the north end looking at those apartment buildings. You can see the power tower here on the right and the lines running across the property, and then another view that shows the house in a more favorable light, more from Pollock Place. Again, you can see the power lines and the tower there. So there's some conditions here. Area B, and here, let me start with this. Area A is the north half of the site where the apartment buildings are, and Area B is the south where the single-family house is. The Area A is a little bit larger, 1.4 acres, and Area B is a little bit over an acre. So Area B, where the house is now, is limited to no more than 2 dwelling units. They've prohibited attached house or a duplex, townhouse and apartments in that area. And then they've also specified that in the 60 days after the rezoning is final, that the applicant would allow the existing structure to either be deconstructed, deconstructed for architectural salvage. In A, where the apartments are, they've said that no residential structure would have more than 10 units. And then they've also said that no residential structure would have any dimensional length greater than 160 feet. So they're doing what they can to manage, doing something to manage mass there in an area that otherwise, the base district would allow 3 stories and 40 feet, but they are limiting the footprint essentially of the building. So there's that map again of the site. And then you can see where the buildings are in Area B and the house in Area, the apartments, and you get it. The residential density goes up here by a fraction of a unit. They currently could have 15 units there, and they've limited themselves to no more than 16. And then the setbacks are not changing. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. Again, the Planning Commission and the CAC both recommended approval. Can I answer questions for you before you open the hearing and hear from the applicant?
Could you repeat what the person who contacted you's concern was as it relates to, did you say stormwater?
Yes, ma'am. Her name is Brenda Compton. She lives at 400 Stacy Street. She was concerned about the surface condition of Ruffin Street. I believe there's been a lot of development in that area that has resulted in a rough street surface, and she's also concerned about stormwater in the neighborhood.
And her stormwater concerns about the neighborhood or this particular site as it relates
I think more broadly about the neighborhood. She was really looking for time. The letter that we mailed to her only arrived to her on Friday, and she was looking for some time to get some more information about the case.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But you said the stormwater, is it on Ruffin Street or?
So there's no, it's not on Ruffin Street specifically. I think it is a neighborhood-wide issue, largely related to construction runoff.
Yeah, there's a creek that runs through the backyard of a lot of houses on Stacy Street, and it's been taking more and more of people's backyards, so I know there's a serious problem there.
Okay. Any other questions, councilors? All right, we'll now open the hearing. Those in favor of the project?
Hi, good evening. My name is John Seibert. I live at 206 East Franklin Street, and I appreciate your listening to our case tonight. The impetus behind this rezoning is essentially to validate what the existing conditions are. The property is one large parcel with multifamily and single-family type dwelling. The owner's intention is to essentially be able to split the lot into 2 parcels so that they have the ability to maintain what's existing, and which the neighborhood also supports, as it provides a mix of housing types within the community, and then also the ability to then do another residence on the other parcel. However, we did ask for 2 lots, which makes it consistent with the R6 zoning that is currently in place. We aren't increasing the zoning density. We worked hard with the neighborhoods and heard their concerns, and I think we started with a higher number, and now we have brought it back down so it's consistent with the land use plan. I think we've had support from the neighborhood throughout the whole process. There have been questions, no doubt, as we've answered their questions and clarified our intentions. I think we've had a cooperative resolution for solving the concerns of both the neighbors and the owners.
Okay.
My name's Donna Bailey, 710 Rosemont. I'm chair of the Hillsborough Wade CAC, and this project did come before us 2 times, and we feel that it's very reasonable. It's basically not changing what's there. It's just a question of, sorry, so they can subdivide. And we love those apartments. It's a great way to show higher density in the neighborhood, and it's going to be very limited to what they can build on the parcel that will now be for a single family. So we as you can see with our number, it was 18-3. The CAC supports it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor of this project? Okay, I think he's leaving. All right. All right, so anyone here to speak against this project? Anyone here to speak against? Okay. I'll bring it back to the table for discussion. I haven't closed the hearing yet. Councilman Crowder, this is in your district.
Yes, and I've had some conversation, and there seems to be the applicant has been very thoughtful in his process and has worked with the residents to try to mitigate any impacts. It's unfortunate that she didn't get the notice until this past Friday. That's unfortunate. I guess the question would be to the applicant, if we should decide for one person that we want to hold this open for conversation, is this someone that we could reach out to have some conversation? Because we're going to be out for about 5 weeks.
So I do have her contact information. She left her business card with me.
Does it affect your project, sir?
Well, we certainly, yeah, we are eager to move forward. They are hoping to build a new home. Actually, it's going to, even though we're going to be allowed to do two dwellings on that, they plan to build just one house. And so they are eager to get going. And we have been through a number of public hearings.
Yeah.
So.
Though
I will say we had excellent turnout at the committee of the whole discussion from the neighborhood on this case.
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversation, and the applicant has been very good working with the neighbors. So I'm going to move to adopt.
So let me, before you do
sorry, you gotta
that,
close the
let me
hearing.
close the hearing.
Yeah.
And now I'll bring it back.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 2nd, 2019, contained in the agenda material, and approve the zoning amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same right. Motion carries. All right, thank you.
Donna, would you reach out to the lady who didn't get her notice until Friday? Yes.
Okay. All right, we now have zoning condition TCZ 119.
Good evening. This is zoning text change that would amend the conditions associated with zoning case Z-47-08. There are currently 19 zoning conditions that govern the two associated properties. These conditions generally regulate the use, lighting, landscaping, density, building materials, buffers, building height, transit amenities, vehicular access, hours of operation, and trip generation amounts. The petitioner is requesting to modify the conditions associated with the 11.2 acre property, which is zoned CX3PK. This is there were two original pieces of property with this original rezoning. This is the you have one to the north that is more oriented towards Lewisburg Road. This is the piece that is more oriented towards Spring Forest. This request would affect, just the 11.2 acres that is located adjacent to Spring Forest. Several conditions, or several of the uses that are listed within the conditions would be removed from the prohibited uses since they are not permitted, no longer permitted in the CX zoning district. Those would be, for example, the landfill, airfield, manufacturing, kennel, a riding stable, and some industrial uses. Other uses that they would specifically list as not permitted would be a heliport, commercial parking lot, remote parking lot, bars, nightclubs, taverns, vehicle sales and rental, detention centers, and vehicle repair, to name just a few of those. There was a restriction on lighting, which would also be removed. The transition yard adjacent to the residential properties that are to the north and to the west of this property would be a type 2 or type 3 yard, and tree conservation areas would be along these lot lines. The condition that requires a buffer on Lewisburg Road would be removed as it relates to the property again to the north. The condition that limits the residential density would be removed. The other property that was rezoned has a request for, that was requested in 2009, has been developed with 300 units, and there's a maximum, currently a maximum of 302 units for both properties. The condition that limits the use of vinyl siding would also be removed. The condition that requires the 100-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the residential properties to the north and to the west would be removed, and the portion of this condition that regulates fencing would be retained. The condition that requires a minimum square footage of residential dwellings will also be removed. The condition that requires cross-access would be removed. The condition that limits development based on trip budget would also be removed. And there would be, the new condition would be added that would require at least 80% of the units be occupied by someone at least 55 years of age or older. This application did go before the Northeast CAC in May. There was a vote of 2 in support of, 38 that were against the project, and then 3 abstentions. This did go through the Planning Commission, and there was unanimous approval for a recommendation. And I believe the applicant is here to provide any additional statements. Staff is available for any questions.
I have one quick question. Is this an affordable housing project?
The applicant could probably address that better than I could, but
Okay.
it's my understanding that there is some affordable housing.
Okay. All right.
Could I ask staff some questions first before we proceed? Could you bring up IMAPs of this property?
Let's see, there's...
Okay, so the question I have is, to the west are some properties, and there's one, well, I'll point it out. This one right here. And there seems to be some sort of access to that property. I was concerned about that because it looks like, and if you put up the aerial of this view.
I don't have the aerial in my slide.
Well, I'll tell you what it looks like. You'll see that there's actually a dirt road that goes over there, and there are actually cars parked there. There are vehicles parked there. So I'm wondering what the deal is as far as that property to the west doesn't seem to have any other access except through that property.
Is that the corner?
That's
It's
currently in question, and I
Elaine-
was wondering.
Elaine Avenue.
Elaine Avenue.
Maybe, yeah.
So would that be trespassing? Mr. Cox?
Well,
I have no idea.
I don't know if there's any sort of agreement with the property owner for them to have access there, so I couldn't really speak to that. Perhaps the applicant has some better information on that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we'll open the hearing. Those 8 minutes per side, those in favor of this may speak first.
Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second.
Thank you. I wanted to start by discussing the need for affordable housing and how that has changed since our comprehensive plan policies came about, as well as address a couple of the points that you just heard about and how what the major neighborhood concerns were and how those have been addressed. So to start with the affordable housing question, the city's comprehensive plan from 2009 certainly discusses the need for affordable housing, and it specifically cites a 2009 statistic, which is that at that time, 74.4% of homes for sale, now these would be rental, but for sale homes in the area were at that time affordable to a median income household in the census area. As of the third quarter of 2018, that same metric has fallen to only 60.7% of homes for sale are affordable to the median household. Now, to compare that number, because those are for sale numbers with the rental numbers, while for sale housing prices in Wake County have increased 16% relative to income between 2006 and 2016, rental housing costs have risen even faster at 35%. So we can see that this is a dire need in the area. I did want to go back and address a couple quick points. One is that although the lighting condition, as far as the cutoff lighting, has been removed from the conditions, that is because it's a requirement of the UDO today, that we have that full cutoff lighting. We're actually not allowed to propose a condition that duplicates something already in the UDO. So that is the purpose of that. Also, we have not removed the prohibition on vinyl siding. That is in the staff report, and so it's in our conditions that are proposed. In response to neighbor concerns.
Just to be clear, there is a prohibition on.
There is a prohibition on vinyl siding. The major neighbor concerns that we heard revolved around three major items. One being a potential street connection between Spring Forest Road and Old Elizabeth Road. Second being that buffer between the neighbors and this site. And third being traffic. That was another concern. With respect to the street connection, we have proposed a prohibition on that street connection so that all access would be from Spring Forest Road and not back to Old Elizabeth Road. With respect to the buffer, there was, in the existing conditions, there is a 100-foot buffer. It contains no planting requirements, and in fact contemplated that commercial use that is what is permitted there today. So loading, unloading trucks, that sort of thing. Between the residential use and the additional neighborhood transition rules that now apply, we think that we have increased that total buffer. So this shows one of the two options for planting that would need to happen under the neighborhood transition, and that would be the other option. There would be two ways to go with that. And with respect to traffic, one of the changes that was made during our public engagement process was to add that restriction. It was already an affordable project, which reduces the parking requirements based on traffic generation. And we also went ahead and restricted this to senior housing. Again, that's one of the keys to reducing the parking requirements. Another indicator that we would be reducing traffic, certainly as compared with the commercial use that's permitted there today. So we think that we've done our best to address all of those concerns as much as we can. We are here to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else speaking in favor of this project?
Let me just ask a quick question just about this slide.
Yes.
So what you're proposing is abutting other residentially developed lots is a 50-foot vegetated buffer?
There would be two options on that. Let me compare them. So one option would be to have that area be 35 feet wide, and it would have a more dense planting. The second option would have it be 50 feet wide and have a slightly less dense planting.
Now, are is that zone already planted, and you'd just be augmenting some existing tree canopy?
What is there now, I don't believe that was intentionally planted. I think what's there now was what was there, and it has been untouched, effectively.
Well,
Forested, I think.
I'm just looking at the aerial.
Right, I think we've got that as well.
I mean, you wouldn't be clearing it and replanting it?
No, we would not.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. My name is Greg Warren, and I'm president of DHIC. Pleased to be here with you tonight. When I started at DHIC 35 years ago, we mainly did family housing. That was what the market studies said the demand was for. And there was not that much demand for affordable seniors housing. Boy, has that changed now. I guess we're all getting older. But we really have had a sea change of demand for affordable seniors housing. So probably over the last 5 years, about half of the developments that we've done is age-restricted housing. And I just wanted to take you through a few of those developments that we've done. If I press the right button. I'm pressing these arrows. Oh, that is. Okay, so here's something we didn't carry. I know that's not Raleigh, but I just wanted to show that off to you. This is Highland Terrace. This is a LEED Gold development built in 2011. The Cary C-Tran comes right through there, so it's a transit-friendly community, 80 apartments. Some of you may just remember when we were doing Water Garden. We had a lot of neighborhood conversations about that. And since we built that, we've had no neighborhood conservations. It's been embraced by the community. We built not only Water Garden Park here, consisting of 88 apartments, which was LEED Silver, but also family apartments behind that development. Tremendous demand, fully filled. Meadow Creek Commons, also in Raleigh, off of Raleigh Boulevard, very close to the Southeast Raleigh Promise Project that we're very much pleased to be a part of. 48 apartments completed in 2011. Willow Creek Apartments in Cary, right at the Morrisville line on Davis Drive. Again, Morris Seniors Apartments 53, apartments for very low-income seniors. Pennington Grove in Garner, we just completed that in 2017, and we're hoping to develop another phase of that. This was 83 apartments at Pennington Grove. And then finally, Village at Washington Terrace. You know, you all have been great partners for us, and we're looking forward to having a great dedication event later this fall. The 162 family apartments filled up immediately, and our 72 seniors units also filled up. So when we open the floodgates for applications on March 1st at 9 a.m., folks are lined up at 3 a.m. in the morning to apply. By 12 noon, we had received over 150 applications, more than we knew that we needed, and have subsequently filled that project. So there's a tremendous demand. We believe that we're good neighbors. We believe that we have quality design. We are here for the long term. We have never sold a property. We continue to reinvest in our properties, and we're proud of what we have. We have a 15 volunteer board of directors. You appoint 5 of those folks, and we believe we're accountable to the community, and we believe a track record that will hopefully lead to your support for this project. But we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Just a couple. So, just for clarification, seniors 55 plus?
Yes.
Okay. And then Mr. Cox's question about the driveway, I really never maybe I missed that, but can you explain that for that?
I can't explain it either, to be honest with you. That's new news to us. I'm not aware of any easements that have been granted to access that property. But
Do you own the property?
Pardon me?
Do you own it?
No, we're contract purchasers of the property, so we are not the owners. But we can certainly look into that, and we will.
Okay. Anyone else here want to speak in favor of this project? 32 seconds.
All right. I'll be very quick then. I am on the Northeast Citizens Advisory Board. I was one of the 2 that voted in favor of this project. I've seen several presentations from the DHIC. I fully support all of their projects and what they are doing for creating affordable housing for seniors. Everybody in Raleigh should be for this. If everybody on the council who claims to be for affordable housing cares about affordable housing, you will vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Could
Your
you
name
give
your name and address, please?
Name and address, ma'am.
Ma'am, your
Ms.
name and
Smith
address.
needs your name and address, please.
Trying to be quick.
Sorry, I was trying to be fast. Amy Howard, 2117 Metacomet Way.
All right, thank you. All right. At this time, anyone here speak in opposition of this project?
My name's Phil Collins.
You can lift that up if you want.
Is that good? My name's Phil Collins, and I live at 4908 Elaine Avenue, and the property adjoins Elaine Avenue. I moved to Elaine Avenue. I built a house out there. For some of you younger folks here, don't realize probably that Spring Forest Road was called Pasture Lane. It was a dirt road, and it ended at Fox Road, and Mr. Green's Dairy took over from there and went to number 1 and straddled across number 1. And we carried our kids up there and rode Mr. Green on the tractors and stepped in manure and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we've lived out there since 1967. I have some other neighbors here that was living there in 1965. The Sandmans own this piece of property, in case I think you asked who owned it. They bought the piece of property from the Brights. The property originally was 24, I think, .6846 acres, something like that. All right, they came before you guys or this committee back in 2009, and they wanted to build on the. I wished I knew how to do all that kind of stuff you guys got, but I don't do it. But up on the north end of that property, they wanted to take 13 point some acres and put apartments on it. And at that time, Mr. Andy Salmon, who owns the property, and he was represented by a lawyer here, and everybody's got lawyers but us. But in any event, he had them to propose to you guys or to this council that they take the 13 acres on the north end of the property, which faces Lewisburg Road, and to change it to apartments. And the apartments that originally were scheduled for 3-story for the entire tract. So by doing that, what he wanted to do was to increase the height of those apartments, to increase the number of units that he could put up there, and save the 11 acres down on the corner of Spring Forest and 401, so that he said the reason he wanted to do that was that property was more valuable for a commercial like dentist office, doctor's office, pharmacy, and he wanted to put all the apartments up there. Of course, our neighborhood, we fought that, and we didn't win. Man, we know that progress has to come, it has to come. We know that. But why in the world would we stick these apartments here on this corner? Now, they call them affordable apartments. They're talking about 55 plus. That's one person in that apartment, 55 plus. Now, what I don't understand is why do we continue to move everybody out of the city of Raleigh and move them to the northeast? We have apartments out there. I mean, I wish I could take you guys out there and ride you around within 1 mile radius of the apartments that surround our little neighborhood of Willowdene Acres. You'd be blown away. And I look at things like the apartments on 401. That's what they're called. 300 and some units of them, 4 stories high. Holly Drive in our neighborhood. They got a 6-foot fence. They're looking up at 4-story apartments in their backyards with a 30-foot buffer. But it was all approved and they built them. Mr. Sandman agreed that what he would do was just use commercial on the corner. He would give us a 100-foot buffer around the property. that backs up to our neighborhood, and that he would not join. He first wanted to join into our neighborhood to direct traffic through our neighborhood, because there's only one entrance and one outlet in our neighborhood. So he agreed to block that off. And so that was in there, and that's what I received from here. I received all this information as well as you guys. I'm sure y'all had it or have access to it. But in any event, with all these apartments out there, and I was glad to hear Mr. Stevens ask about, well, what about affordable units down on Peace Street? Why do they keep pushing them way out? Why do they put them way out there? It's not walkable. It's not workable. There's nothing out there. Just old common folks like us. That's all's out there. And we have to drive everywhere we go. You know, I look at Spring, you got 401 apartments. You got Spring Forest, all this within a half a mile, Spring Forest apartments. And guess what? They got one set of apartments right up the road from us called Avonlea. That's owned by DHIC. DHIC is a fine company. I'm sure they are. But here they are wanting to put another one a half a mile down the road. We've got Senior Apartments has just opened, having their brand new opening right across number 1 from us on Spring Forest. You have Avonlea, which he owns right up the road from us. You have the apartments there on Spring Forest Apartments, which is, gosh knows, I guess there's 350 apartments in that. You got all the apartments on Fox Road. You got the town center where the man was killed not long ago, bless his heart. You got the New Hope Road. We feel that we are just being squeezed with apartments. Why in the world can't we limit that corner to what he suggested when he had y'all to approve the number of units up on the north end of the property? Why can't we live with what he says he would do? However, now he still owns the property, but he's not here. He's not the one requesting the zoning. You got the contractor who wants to build the apartments requesting zoning. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Oh, one more thing. Excuse me, Mr. Branch, I'd like just to see how many of my neighbors are here. Would they stand up and see if any of my neighbors are here? And you know what? This is July the 4th, and a lot of them are gone. They're on vacation. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right. We will bring this back to the count. Well, it's 42 seconds. Anyone else want to speak in against? Okay. We'll bring this back to the council. I'm here looking. Did you want to ask something?
Sure. This is in my district, and I've met with the neighbors, and I've been to the CAC meetings on this. And first of all, I do want to say that I do favor affordable housing, even at this location. However, some of the conditions that are being proposed to be removed, I think we need to have some more discussion, such as the buffer. I know the applicant's attorney, I think, said something about this being commercial property, and that a 100-foot buffer would have been appropriate to buffer against large trucks. However, the resident's description of commercial was more like small office, so I'm not sure that the 100-foot buffer was really designed to guard against large trucks, but rather just the parking and traffic that would be associated with office buildings. So I'd like to have some more discussion about the buffer, and see what we can, if there can be any more accommodation or definition around what that buffer would look like. The other thing that I'd like to discuss is, obviously the applicant has asked to remove the cap on the number of units. And rather than having that completely opened up to the max, I'd like to have some discussion about what would be reasonable limits on the number of units. Then, of course, the other question is this late-breaking news about this driveway and parking area, and then also the fact that the adjacent homes were built a very long time ago, and they are very close to the property line. And so can we have some discussion about what can be done to buffer those particular homes, in particular these 3 or 4 properties to the west? So with all of that, I guess what I would like to do is make a recommendation to move this to Growth and Natural Resources so that we can have maybe a little bit more discussion in committee.
I have a question. Maybe staff or the applicant can answer this. Based on the current tree line, how thick is that buffer? I'm looking at this on Google Maps, and I see the property has been cleared. Do we know how thick that current tree line is?
Yes. Ken Thompson with J. Davis Architects, 501 South Wilmington Street. That current buffer is approximately 100 feet.
Okay. So it's currently 100 feet. Okay.
The other issue that I wanted to bring to light as well is that I've communicated with Planning Department about our location policy regarding affordable housing. And I'm told that if this were not senior housing, that this would require a waiver to our location policy because of other nearby affordable housing. However, this isn't 100% senior housing. This is only 80% senior housing. So there's 20% that's not senior housing. So one of the things I would like to have some discussion about in committee is how this particular project relates to our location policy and to get some clarification around that.
Okay, the chair of the committee, are you agreeable to?
So I guess the question I have, Mr. Cox, is listing the things that you just listed. I just want to make sure I understand the scope of what you want to do. Could you release those, please?
Mm-hmm. So the scope would be to get clarity around what an acceptable buffer would be, and to get clarity on our location policy, and to get clarity on the maximum number of units.
Okay, and then I would like some if we're going to move it into committee, I would like some information on how it appears that someone is accessing their home. And it appears to me, when I looked at it from a drone perspective, that it looks like there's a building built on the property that you were talking about rezoning. So if we could have some information about that, that would be helpful.
Right, that as well. Yes, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, I'll take it into my committee.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we ask if that timing works for the applicant?
Yeah, how does
sure.
Does that time work?
The timing of moving this to committee,
Uh-huh.
that's not a problem for us.
Okay.
Thank
all
you,
right.
Molly.
All right. So we will move this to Growth and Natural Resources to be addressed in committee, and it will then come back to council. And we will leave the hearing open at this time.
Yep.
All right. Next, we have 2030 Comp Plan Update CP2C19.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
Clarification, if we're leaving the hearing open, we should do a date specific.
Well, my next Growth and Natural Resources Committee is what, 20?
Something.
I mean, do you want to bring it back to council for the you discuss it in committee, but.
Yeah, it's going to be discussed in committee, and we could bring it to the
September
Wednesday,
3rd.
August 28th.
September 3rd would be your
September
next
3rd will be our next
available.
city council meeting.
Well, the question is, will we address all the issues on the 28th?
Probably not.
I don't know.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, so if we have to have a date certain with it sitting in committee, do we have to have that? We do? So you might give us to the second meeting in
September 17th.
Just because I'm uncertain if we would have it completed.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
You ready?
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
ready.
So we're going to talk about part of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan update tonight. You approved or adopted a portion of the update back on June 4th. And tonight we're going to talk about economic prosperity and equity and expanding housing choice. You have scheduled the coordinating land use and transportation portion of the update for a September 3rd hearing. And earlier today you scheduled the remainder for additional public hearing dates after the break, later in the year. So that's where we are in the process. Remember, you referred these portions to Planning Commission, and they've been reporting back to you piece by piece, and they have completed their review. So tonight, I'm going to talk about the economic development section of the update, the housing section, and a new section, the public participation section, which is a subsection of the implementation section of the plan. So the economic development section is our vision for economic vitality, and the update refreshes data in action. The housing section, significant changes there related to the expanding housing and neighborhoods work plan. And then the new section is aimed at achieving equity in the planning process. So the economic development section lays out a vision for future economic vitality in Raleigh. The main goals are to attract business, retain and expand existing business, attract investment to areas that suffer from lack of investment more recently. There are 8 subsections in the economic development section. They focus on a variety of topics, as you can see here. There are 65 policies and 39 actions. Among those, 4 policies were revised and we added a new policy. In the action section, 2 were revised. There are 4 new and 4 were removed. So a relatively light touch in terms of extent of impact here in this particular element. So 2 new actions here. One is about promoting commercial reinvestment that calls to identify incentives and other economic development tools to promote reinvestment in underperforming commercial corridors. And then also a new action about green technology strategy that's aimed at developing a regional strategy for attracting and supporting businesses and startups in the green technology industry with participation from regional economic development entities as well as research universities. A couple more new actions, financial assistance for new retailers, and then post-disaster strategic planning. So looking at the exploration of creation of a loan pool, grant provisions, other assistance to potential new retailers, and then the post-disaster strategic planning. Really, that I would say ties to a broader series of changes in the plan related to resilience. So really trying to beef up our resilience actions in the plan overall. We have updated the graphic, but not the intent or import of the target areas for economic development. The Raleigh Arts Plan, the priority areas for economic development, and the strategic plan are all relevant and were consulted, really driving revisions here. The white paper, remember, we drafted a white paper for your review that forecasted what changes we would make in the various sections of the plan. And the big forecast here was that we should get the language right about what we call this group in the city, the people that actually do the work. And so the nomenclature of Office of Economic Development and Innovation was applied throughout. And then the map updates and policy and action item changes were also forecasted in the white paper. This particular section relates to the economic development and prosperity vision theme, as well as the Greenprint Raleigh sustainable development vision theme. And we consulted with the Office of Economic Development throughout the update about what changes should be made in this section. We received no public comment about this particular section as part of the public outreach in the review process for the update. The Planning Commission recommended a change here for the cultural resource preservation action. They asked us to strike the words "or financial" to just say provide development incentives for preservation of cultural resources. That's my conclusion on economic development. I'm going to move on to housing. So this section of the plan emphasizes the importance of providing a range of housing types throughout Raleigh and assuring housing opportunities for all segments of the city's population. There are 4 subsections here, one about quality and diversity of housing, a second about affordable housing, the third about addressing homelessness and special needs, and then the 4th and final section about fair housing, universal design, and aging in place. In this section, there are 34 policies and 40 actions. 10 of the policies were revised. There are 2 new and 8 were removed. And then the actions, 2 were revised, 3 are new, and 10 were removed. So you're seeing a pretty significant change. But this is, I would say, I want to actually go to a different slide. I'm not going to get there. I'm sorry. There's been a significant change in the work plan of housing in neighborhoods in the time since the plan was adopted, work that they've done with you to adopt new policies about location and strategy. And so really that's what's reflected there. We updated this map of subsidized affordable housing, so you can see indicated here, North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, low-income housing tax credit projects, those are shown in pink. The Raleigh Housing Authority public housing is shown in green, and then affordable city-owned rentals are shown in blue, and joint city ventures are shown in a lighter blue, as well as federally funded projects, so you get an idea of where subsidized affordable housing is located in the city. This table is based on the average median income in June of 2017, and really is trying to articulate those definitions about affordable to whom, right? We have a lot of conversation about that, and so putting in language about that, and then talking about how our programs relate to those different types of, those different households in the AMI ranges. The white paper told us that we should update statistical data, noted some pending studies, including the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, told us that we should coordinate with strategic plan, and then amendments to existing policies and actions that reflect changes of approach and priority based on other adopted plans, of which there were several. Couple of affordable, relevant plans here. This is what I was referencing earlier. So the 5-year consolidated plan, the affordable housing improvement plan, as well as the affordable housing location policy. So the 5-year consolidated plan covers 2016 to 2020, addresses needs for very low, low, and moderate income residents, and is required by HUD as a prerequisite to receive CDBG, home, and ESG funds. The Affordable Housing Improvement Plan covers the same period. It expands our 4% tax credit usage through the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, provides financial resources for affordable rental development and infill home ownership, includes our neighborhood revitalization strategy plan, addresses homelessness prevention, and then also that permanent affordable housing funding source, that $0.50 for housing. The affordable housing location policy is really talks about how we create and preserve affordable multifamily rental housing, and that policy is expressed in words and also in a map. The goal is to increase supply and locations near employment and commercial development, encourage development near existing and proposed transit, provide housing near downtown and in approved revitalization areas, and to prevent concentrations of minority and low-income persons. So the housing location policy, so the area shown in the orange color here, or yellow, I don't know what it looks like. Up there it looks yellow over it. Anyway, that is an area where you have a population that's less than 50% minority, less than 30% of households in poverty, and fewer than 8% of the housing units are subsidized. And then the hatched areas, so there's one here and a couple in here, pretty faint, I'm afraid, on your screens. Those are located within a half mile of BRT or light rail or rail stops within a half mile of 15-minute service, rubber tire service stops, or other areas designated by use. So like that exception that was mentioned earlier, that would be a council designated area. Policy H1.8 zoning for housing is proposed for revision. I believe this is a recommendation of the Planning Commission. So they are adding language that suggests that in areas characterized by detached housing, accommodation should be made for additional housing types while maintaining a form and scale similar to existing housing, what we talk about as missing middle or gentle density, right? Ties to a handful of vision themes, expanding housing choice, economic prosperity and equity, as well as coordinating our land use and transportation theme. Obviously, we consulted extensively with housing and neighborhoods on this one. We had a public meeting, remember we had themed public meetings in 2017 about the update. We had a meeting on the topic of housing. There were 80 folks that attended at Tarboro Road. Extensive public comment there, concerns about offsetting the loss of affordable housing as a result of redevelopment, increasing zoning entitlement to allow additional housing. How will we address housing needs for population growth, a desire for in-law suites and smaller houses that might help, a need for affordable housing near downtown, and interest in the idea of inclusionary zoning. Planning Commission's recommendations in policy H1.9, so some language here about not just in the immediate area around transit corridors, but also mixed-use districts, especially downtown and near employment and commercial centers. So really expanding the range of where we think housing diversity should be. And then some desire to add Wake County Transit, that plan doesn't specifically call out a link to the Raleigh-Durham Airport, and the Planning Commission felt like that was important. So that's the extent of their recommendations. And then I want to talk about this new section, subsection of the implementation section, participation in planning, which addresses equity and openness in the planning process and public participation. So there are 3 subsections here: barriers to participation, making input easier, and rights and responsibilities. The new language addresses rights, the right to participate, and the right to understand, that everybody should be able to take part, and that information should be presented in a clear and understandable way. And then finally, that every voice should be considered equally, regardless of whether it's provided in person or online or by some other means. And then finally, responsibility, that if you are participating in the process, you have an obligation to consider alternative perspectives and to consider the effects of decisions, not just on you, but on the city and the region as a whole and in the long term. So this subsection has a very limited number of new policies and actions. So access to participation and authentic participation are 2, and then a third is a quality of input. And then the action, I believe there's just this one, which is about the input study, that we should have a study to evaluate methods for broadening participation in all our processes, including a focus on online participation, and develop a best practices manual and a toolkit to help guide participation going forward. This is tied closely to ideas in the strategic plan and elsewhere in the comprehensive plan. The subsection is really reflected in that guidance for coordination with the city's strategic plan, and it's meant to align with that plan's values regarding transparency, openness, and meaningful public interaction around city decisions. The Planning Commission recommended approval but made no recommendations for revision to this section. What questions could I answer for you about the public input subsection, housing, or economic development before you open the hearing?
Questions?
Actually, I have a question for Tansy. And it's really not a question so much as it's an opportunity to just make comment on the conversation we've had recently about this. Sorry, it's late. Caught you napping, sorry. So the conversation we had is about American Planning Association has just in May produced a planning for equity policy guide that has some policies about gentrification, citizen engagement, and empowerment that don't really show up in this new section 17.6 on citizen participation. But rather than just try to squeeze them in here at the end of this process, I think you had a comment about a better way to look at them in the context of a larger process that we've got ongoing.
So thanks for the opportunity to share information. So I think for the context of the rest of the council members, so I think many of you have standing monthly meetings with the planning department to hear about initiatives. So I think that's the meeting that the council member is referring to, and this question came up about ways to incorporate that. I think out of our discussion, there were at least 2 opportunities that were identified. One, as you'll recall from prior discussions, one of your previous budget priorities for the planning department was for the planning department to identify a citizen engagement model similar to some of the other engagement models that exist in the city. That work is just beginning within the planning department. I think you had an update as the council a couple of weeks ago about that. I think coming out of that study will be an opportunity to revisit some of these policies and whether or not additional enhancements are appropriate to be made. In addition to that, a couple of weeks ago, you had a work session around equity. And at that time, the council, there was a motion that gave direction to city staff to work on a number of things around equity. One of those was also to identify potential enhancements to the comprehensive plan that would address and advance equity. I think that's another way for those 2 things to inform each other and potentially to build on what is this new section, but provides a foundation that could be altered with those additional processes in the future. Is that helpful?
Thank you so much. I guess the point here is to say we've got a lot going on in the city related to improving citizen engagement and equity, which is addressed in this comp plan update, but there's ongoing, after we finish the comp plan update or these other elements too, we'll be able to even further improve our policies on equity and citizen participation.
That's exactly right. So the only action here is the study that we're already pursuing, and I can imagine that would result in some more direction on this topic. Right. It seems hard to write policy and action without having had the benefit of that process.
Great.
Yep.
Any other questions for staff before we open the hearing? Okay.
Not now.
Okay. At this time, we'll open the hearing for those to provide comments on this. How many people are here to speak on this topic? I see 2. Okay. All right. So we'll do 2 people. We'll just do 4 minutes apiece.
How many minutes?
4.
Thank you very much. My name is Octavia Rainey, and I live at 1516 East Lane Street. The first thing I want to start off is to talk about your citizen participation plan. First of all, your citizen participation plan needs change. Citizen has the right to be involved in a process. And being involved in a process is not walking into a meeting and writing your concerns on a wall. The meeting we had Thursday, it was wrong. You didn't know whether people could read or write, but still they were asked to put their comments on the wall. Second of all, you didn't follow the guidelines for working with people with disabilities. You didn't have anyone there signing at all. So I would like to tell you, I have read 700 citizens participation plans, and the one that is under CDBG, it don't work. Not the way it's structured now. It don't work. Second, I want to talk about one of your policies in housing. I would like to say to this city council, y'all are wrong for putting in a policy about poverty to disperse black people if there are too many living in a neighborhood. You disperse black people. And then you go for mixed income. As you know, I am not a supporter of the neighborhood strategy program. In my neighborhood in College Park, you have the private developers doing market rates starting at $350,000. You have community development also doing market rate. There's a house in East College Park. It's $450,000 plus. That project needs to be looked at again. It is the wrong project. They haven't started building the townhouses yet. So what you're doing is really gentrifying, making it a white project. The project is wrong. The city should have never done market rate. Never, ever, ever. So why is the city doing market rate? So that means that the lot sold for $25,000. So you take a $25,000 lot and sell it for $450 plus? What is the equity? See, equity with y'all is a statement. It's not reality. It's not reality at all. What's going on in that project is not reality. And then you're going to come on top of it with the Newbern Avenue corridor. That is in the 15, the 1600, and the 1700 block, and make it multi-use. You don't need any multi-use right there. Don't do it. On the Newbern Avenue corridor, don't do it. It should be strictly business because you have College Park coming, and it is primarily a white project. You asked Larry for the racial breakdown. I have ran the Honda data on the project, and with the 23 new houses being built by the private developer, those things are $350,000 on up. Now, whether that's done by design, because you know the average black person can't buy no $350,000 house. That's for real. Ain't no joke about that. So why is the city doing market rate of all people? I don't get that. So I would suggest that on the Newbern Avenue corridor, the 1600, the 1700, the 1300 block, that should be all business. No housing whatsoever.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey.
Good evening. My name is Paul Kane. I'm the Executive Vice President and CEO for the Home Builders Association of Raleigh-Wake County, located at 5580 Centerview Drive in Raleigh. It should come no surprise to you that I'm here to talk about the housing section. The Raleigh is in a really difficult place right now because you guys see this at every meeting you face, that we are growing. Growth is uncomfortable. Growth brings change. So we've got these two forces that are kind of playing against each other. One of them is to preserve neighborhoods and preserve character, but at the same time allow for wider diversity options in housing and to increase density. I know we all heard in a recent poll that the word density is, we're not supposed to use that, but it's true, we need it. And I just have a couple of comments. I studied the housing section as it's being offered, and the first is there's a new action item that's in updated plan, Action H 1.6, and it says study housing policy and regulation with a focus on infill development and accommodation of housing types such as duplexes, small apartments, townhomes, and areas where they're not currently permitted. And I think this is a great and welcome addition. I know this isn't one of these topics where we're speaking for or against something, but I am going to say I'm for that action item, especially as it relates to the diversity of housing types, and also that it's going to be a study focusing on policy and regulation. I think that is an excellent addition to the comprehensive plan. Also, I noted in just in terms of being able to try to really promote affordable housing, which is just so desperately needed in Raleigh, policy H 2.20 states incentivize private developers to create new affordable housing on privately owned sites through city funding. I think that is a great policy, but I think it limits itself a little bit because you're talking about incentivizing private developers to create new affordable housing, that's exactly what needs to be done. But then saying to do it through city funding, I don't think we should limit it to city funding. I think we should look at options that can incentivize builders to build affordable without necessarily having to put up city funds. Consider expedited permitting, density bonuses. There's all kinds of things that could be done to incentivize builders to build affordable housing, and I think that that policy stops too short by limiting it to city funding options. Just a note that on policy H 1.6, housing preservation, and that policy reads, encourage the preservation of existing housing units where or whenever feasible, especially structures of historic and architectural significance. If you take off the especially part and just look at the first part, encourage preservation of existing housing units whenever feasible, that is a very, very broad-based concept and a very ambiguous and subjective terminology that I think could lead to problems that you've probably already experienced. Just in the interest of time, I'll get to the last one. Policy H 1.4, affordable housing design. This one was actually changed and to change some of the wording, but I think it needs to be looked at even further because some of that talks about design, appearance, context of the neighborhood, and I think when this was originally written, it predated the aesthetics law that was passed in 2015, and so I think that if you use some of the language from Policy 1.8 on form and scale, I think you can navigate around that aesthetics law and still get a policy that you want without it being running afoul of the law. Thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to bring it back to council. I definitely think, based on some of the feedback we just heard, we need to really look at this a little bit more than just tonight. So I think we should hold this at the table. I would say at least until August 20th, but I would say just hold it at the table. We don't have to give a date certain to this, do we? If I hold it?
Comp plan update.
I just want to make sure.
Depends on what you're doing with the public hearing. That was
Right. Well, so there's no time limit once you close the hearing on a comprehensive plan amendment, which is what this is. So you could close the hearing and then hold at the table at your pleasure.
Okay.
That gives us an opportunity to reach out to your staff and talk about the things that
you have concerns about.
we have concerns about.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'll hold this at the table at this time, I say until September 3rd. Give everyone some time.
Sure.
All right, because I'm pretty sure some of you are traveling during your break, so I figured to give you some time. I know we have 2 for the hearing that night, but this would be during the day. So this will be during our 1 o'clock session.
Could I request some information, though? I think Ms. Rainey brought up some important issues about our current projects that we're doing in terms of what the price points are. I mean, how many market rate units are we building, and what are the price points on those? And what are the demographics as far as who's moving into these units? And I was wondering if that could also be provided as part of the input for this discussion.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay, thank you.
So basically just the price points of some of the property over there in the plan.
Well, I'd like to know how many market rate units we're actually building and selling, and how many affordable units we're actually building and selling, and what are the demographics of the area.
Can we actually do this in one of the managers' update? Can we just get an update on the NSRA plan? Because I think that'd be helpful to just get it, because we haven't touched it or smelled it or done anything with it in a while.
However they want it delivered is fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, just give us a little bit of extra time than a week turnaround or so.
Sure. Right.
Give us a few weeks, and we'll bring it back when we gather some data for you. And then, just to be clear, did you close the public hearing or not?
Yes.
So you closed the public hearing,
closed.
and then special item on September 3rd?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Helping Gail.
The only thing I'll add, I do appreciate Mr. Kane's comments that seem like there's some opportunities for improvement. And also, I had 20-plus, mostly clarification and technical questions. I need to get up with staff and just go through it too. So.
Okay. That should give you all some time to meet with staff as we go there. Next, we have Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 419.
So this is a citizen request to modify map T1, the street plan in the comprehensive plan. And it's proposing to remove proposed segments of Oak Forest Drive and Triangletown Boulevard and add a new segment parallel to Triangletown Boulevard between Sumner and Oak Forest Drive. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request and then also recommends removal of a stub segment of Triangletown Boulevard south of the proposed Oak Forest Drive. The North CAC received this for information but chose not to vote. Not that they were not offered the opportunity, but they just didn't choose to do that. So here's the request. So here's Triangletown. Wait a minute. I got a little carried away. So here's the existing Triangletown and existing Sumner. And this is going to remove the extension of Triangletown that would have been here and Oak Forest extension that would have been here in favor of an alternate connection. And you can see on this drawing, I believe, there's a Duke Energy substation here and an easement that runs parallel to Triangletown. And it's a relatively high power station, and they really don't want us to cross the easement that close to the station for safety and security reasons. So this alternate is what was proposed. And then the stub, you can see basically Planning Commission is saying, take the stub off. So that's that. So again, here's the existing street plan. So we're east of Capitol Boulevard, south of 440, and south of Triangletown Center proper. And so
south of 540.
Right. What did I say? Did I say north?
440.
Oh, I'm so sorry. 540. We're north of 440 and south of 540. And so you can see the existing proposed connection here. Here's an aerial view of the site, so you can see that substation and the easement pretty clearly here. And then the zoning, we have a lot of commercial mixed-use zoning in this area, a little bit of residential to the east and south, some R1 residential 1 zoning on the Spring Forest Road Park, and then between the commercial area of Triangletown Center and Capitol Boulevard, you also have some industrial mixed-use zoning there on the west side of the mall. Future land use map and the zoning pattern are relatively well matched here. What doesn't show up in the zoning is some public parks and open space designations that follow parks and proposed greenways and some blue line, it looks like here. So there are some prominent utility towers north of the substation. Those are called out here on the map. And then grading is restricted as part of, I believe, some zoning conditions in the this area and this particular parcel on this, and you can see that on this map. And that's, I guess, also part of the deference to the substation. And you can see where the proposed street would go right through that restricted area. So that's the conflict there. So this is consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan, the currently adopted plan, and is also recommended for approval by your Planning Commission. Can I answer questions before you open the hearing?
Any questions? All right. We'll now open the hearing. Is anyone here to speak to this? Are you the only person?
I've got my landscape architect is here.
Okay. Is he planning on speaking as well? Or is he just here for questions?
If needed.
Okay. We'll give you 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh, we got 8.
This zoning conditions. This is a comp plan.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to go quickly.
And I'm just being consistent with what I did with the last comp plan.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. My name is Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. Here tonight with Harrison Ellenwood, I think is still here, of Carolina Equities, and Ken Thompson of J. Davis, our landscape architect. Mark Tipton, the principal and the developer, wanted to be here tonight but is at home recovering from surgery and could not be here. As presented by staff, this is comp plan amendment modifying the streets map and will facilitate the development of an affordable housing community located near Triangle Town Center, which will provide a total of 456 affordable units. They'll be in 4 separate little sub-projects, including 264 family and 192 senior affordable units. Do I not do these? Okay. Yes. Okay. Carolina Equities has received 2018 HFA tax credits, and this council has agreed to invest $6 million in this development. The city streets map shows a connection of Oak Forest Road, as has been previously shown. This dotted area here is the proposed connection, but because of several impediments, we're just not going to be able to do that. And I'll just go through what those are. This is our map that kind of shows the reasons we can't do this. The red areas are areas where Duke Energy has said they're towers, no blasting, no grading. The black area is an area where it's very steep and it's really impossible or difficult to put a road through there. The blue area there's a News River buffer coming through this area. And then this upper blue area is adjacent to this existing stormwater retention pond on this property. And then again, we have another red area up here where no grading, no blasting. We propose 2 new sections, which this is our site plan here. And you can see the way the units are laid out. If you go back to our plan of the roads, the proposed streets map, if I can find it, is, so we would take Oak Forest and bring it here and go up here. So you still have some east-west and you have some north-south. We would come down here and cul-de-sac this, but convey right-of-way so that if there's ever a desire to connect from the school site down here, we could do that. We also would have a cross-access over here. We feel like we achieve the north-south connection and the east-west that the comprehensive plan desires. We feel that it's really an impossibility to connect where the comprehensive plan streets map shows a connection. Were unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. We were received favorably by Northeast CAC. They were given an opportunity to vote or bring it back for a vote the next meeting. They said they didn't think that was necessary. We did file this case the first day of the May comp plan filing period in an effort to expedite. As you know, affordable developments have really tight time constraints, and so we would appreciate approval tonight if possible. We do have to get subdivision approval, then ASR approval, and then a complicated closing with HUD insured financing, housing finance tax credits, city funds, and bank closing, all by year end. So we are here. Ken Thompson is here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
And see, you can do it in 4 minutes. All right.
I was a little hurried.
And I don't think anyone else was here to speak on this. I know you have your tech land planning if needed. I'll bring us back to council.
Yes. This is in my district, and I do have serious concerns about this because that intersection right now is Sumner and Triangle Town Center. There's no light there, and it's a terrible intersection. There's a tremendous amount of traffic. I continually get requests to have a traffic light put there. And so the thing that I'm concerned about is having yet another intersection so close to that existing intersection. So I would really like to hear from the Transportation Department about what the impact would be of having another intersection so close to that existing intersection. in particular, where this is proposed to come out on Sumner, right across the street, they're putting in a hotel. It's being built right now. So that's going to add even more traffic.
I think that I'm a little bit familiar with some of the issues of that intersection, and I know my colleagues in operations are looking at solutions there. The spacing between a location here and here meets our intersection spacing guidelines. It is true that by not having it here, we, in the long term, on average, reduce the amount of traffic here, which makes the point at which a traffic signal is an obvious solution a little further out or a little less likely. So the concern isn't unwarranted. But this is far enough away to not be, I think, a particular problem that makes it worse. It's really a function of how does that intersection with its footprint and with its traffic patterns going to work best in the future. And I unfortunately can't speak about what my colleagues in traffic engineering have been investigating there. I'm not up to speed on all the details there.
Well, what I'm concerned about is that if we put a traffic light at the existing intersection and now we add another intersection, now we're going to have traffic coming out at the other intersection that's going to experience the same problem that we currently have at the other intersection, which is it's going to be difficult coming out of there and making left turns onto Sumner. Whereas if we kept the original plan, the current plan, then all the traffic would come out at the same intersection, at the same one intersection, which could then be controlled by a light, and that totally eliminates any conflicts.
It can, depending on how you design the light. But yes, I understand your point, is that less traffic here means that there is not the ability to control all the east-west and north-south movements at one traffic signal, and that is true. I think the challenge we have is that if this street can't connect to here, do we have an ability, is there a ability to, there is no ability to get over to that intersection. One thing that the applicants request, the information they provided from Duke Energy, does appear to indicate there might be the ability to snake a small street through there. That might be something to be required through a site plan approval. But the distance between Sumner Boulevard and there is too close for us to consider that appropriate for the street plan. The network level that we're looking at here is a much broader grid, of which our block perimeter standards then flesh it out a little bit more.
So I guess the question in my mind is, can we explore in more detail with Duke Energy the possibility of going across that easement? I mean,
I think the information that was provided and some side conversation between somebody at Duke and my supervisor made that very clear, that nothing in this area is remotely feasible.
Right, but what about further to the north of that?
Further up here?
Right.
I think it would be the Transportation Planning Division's point of view that putting a street in here in the street plan is not an appropriate use of the street plan, because it would be a very narrow, very local street, and it would be very redundant with Sumner Boulevard. And that if there's a desire to make a connection like that between the existing intersection of Triangle Town Boulevard and Sumner Boulevard and this development further to the west, that's something that can be looked at and can be done, but that the street plan itself isn't the venue to require that necessarily.
Well, I guess I don't quite follow that. I mean, the idea of the street plan is for us to be able to plan out streets that operate well. And in my view, having two intersections so close to each other, and Sumner Boulevard is a very busy street, to me just doesn't make sense.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What are you putting in place for left-hand turns here?
This will be a median divided, and it'll be a right in, right out.
Okay, so it's just right in, right out.
Yeah, so that you won't have that left turn issue there.
Well, that seems like that would be a problem as well.
Well, it's a solution to one problem.
Well, another solution is to be able to do exactly what was just drawn up here, which is to go to the north and then turn to the right and connect in where you can come up to the one intersection.
Well, the area that could potentially cross there is like like Jason said, it's very close to Sumner. It's also only 50, maybe 55 feet, and so it's really narrower than the city's
Right.
street plans would require.
It would not be an avenue collector type street, which is in this area is generally the function of the street plan. I'm going to point out exactly what we're looking at. This is an exhibit provided by the applicant. The red zones are areas in which Duke Energy Progress would not allow grading or blasting, particularly blasting was a concern in the broader areas. And given the soil characteristics out here and the need for grading, blasting would be assumed to be required to change the grade significantly in this area. And then in addition, because the towers are here and here and here, the lines sag vertically quite a bit. And that when you're in this area here, there's not a lot of vertical clearance between the ground and those high voltage lines, and that getting enough clearance between the top of a tall vehicle and those lines would be a particular concern as well. So really, we're potentially looking at maybe a little window here, and I don't know that that is feasible. I just know that it isn't certainly infeasible at this point, but it is a very short distance away from Sumner Boulevard. I was not aware or was not thinking about whether or not there was a median there at this point. If it is right in, right out, any left turning traffic that's trying to make that movement would go here and make a U-turn, and that could be accomplished probably better with a signal. So that traffic is influencing
that makes sense.
The ability to put a signal in there.
Okay. So then can we incorporate in the street plan that would be a right in and right out?
The street plan doesn't really have a venue for us to say anything about the intersection design. That's something that the site plan approval would deal with. It may be that way already. If there's already a median there, I would assume that would be the assumption. There isn't a median there already.
There's one further down in front of Dick's.
Yeah, it's
in front of Dick's. There's one.
Yeah, that's over here.
No, actually, I don't think
there's a crosswalk.
There's a crosswalk,
and
but
there's a median.
There's a little median refuge,
There's a
at
refuge.
least one, yeah, there.
Okay. I don't remember that.
So I do apologize that I can't speak very intelligently about the operations intersection other than know my colleagues have been looking at it and are thinking about solutions. They may have something in the works. They may have a strategy, and this site plan may be related to that strategy. It's just not something I can speak to at the moment.
Okay, but yeah, I'm just a little surprised that we can't specify in our street plans things like directional movements of cars that like right in, right out.
Is just the network and the type. We have another map in the comp plan that specifies grade separations and interchanges. For instance, we know in our comp plan where the completion of 540 will have an interchange with a local street.
Okay.
But we don't say anything about the intersection design other than that.
Okay. All right. I believe you've addressed my concerns then.
Okay. Is that a motion for approval?
I'll move for approval.
All right, I'm making sure there's not a, okay. So moved and properly second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. All right, thank you. We now have text change TC1C18. Is there anyone here to speak to this? All right, seeing none, I'm gonna open the hearing.
Close
Is there anyone to speak to this? You're gonna get a chance.
No, I would like to see the presentation.
No, you're gonna get a chance.
Okay.
Is there anyone else to speak to this? Anyone here to speak to this? I will now close the hearing and allow staff to do their presentation.
I did not mean to do that. This is what happens when you ask for the slideshow.
Yes.
Nope, nope, there you go.
Yeah. Yes, here we are. Okay, TC 1C-18. This amends multiple sections of Part 10 of the UDO. This adoption of this text change would subject permanently installed generators associated with residential uses to the same setbacks as those for the primary structure within the district it's located. It would allow A-frame signs to be located in the right-of-way through a minor encroachment approval. It would give the city council review authority for any variances or appeals of administrative decisions associated with stormwater management, with flood-prone area regulations, with erosion and sediment control, and with watershed protection areas. And it would require site posting and published notice for non-single unit living subdivisions in the Metro Park Overlay District and and notice for all subdivisions of properties in the Historic Overlay District. Lastly, it would require only the number of copies of a final plat to be submitted to the city that are necessary to fulfill the requirements of the Register of Deeds office. Currently, we ask for 3. This would reduce that to 2. This text change was discussed at multiple GNR meetings and was unanimously recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. Staff is available for any questions.
Any questions or motions?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. You probably should open and close the public
Again.
hearing.
All right, I'll open the hearing. I did it before. Yeah. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 2nd, 2019, containing the agenda material, and to approve the zoning text amendment. So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, motion passes. We are now, oh, anything else, anyone?
Nope.
We are now adjourned and on break.